Oh, 12 o'clock on your Monday afternoon now. Welcome in. It is the halftime show. Tyler had no Bill Gunner today. He is expected to be back tomorrow, as always. If me and him are out for a day, it's usually going to be something medically related. So we'll get him in here tomorrow. We'll get his reactions to everything that happened over the weekend. I'm assuming Captain Dave is probably producing 3 to 6 today because Terry's out, and our guy Scott Hamilton's going to be filling in. So Cale Wilson filling in, producing. Cale, how we doing today?
I'm doing all right, man. I'm just trying to figure out how to get this chair to lift up. But besides that, I'm great.
So there should be a second one in there.
That's probably the one I'm about to grab.
Okay.
Because this one won't go up. And,
I never understood why we have 2 chairs in there. We don't really need it. We really have 2 people in there. But yeah, that because I think the other one is the one that's typically sitting a lot higher. So that might be your better option for comfort for today.
Yeah, probably. But, maybe I just want to be uncomfortable.
Yeah, hey, that's okay. Being uncomfortable is all right. We all deal with uncomfortable things in life, uncomfortable things in sports as well. Yeah, that's all right, man.
If this is the uncomfortable thing I want to deal with in life, then my life is going pretty well.
You know what? That is a really good way to look at it. That's a first world problem if I've ever heard one. My chair is too low and it's a little bit uncomfortable. There's people in the world suffering a little bit more than that. So always good to keep perspective, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, man, a lot of things to get to over the course of the show. Elijah Campbell going to join us in the 1 o'clock hour, talk some women's basketball, as he was there in person yesterday in Greenville, or over the weekend in Greenville, as South Carolina was taking place in the women's tournament. Of course, they come up short to Texas yesterday. We'll get into some Dawn Staley sound and all that coming up in a minute as well. Baseball ends up getting a sweep of Princeton over the weekend, which was obviously good to see. They hadn't had a sweep in a series so far this season. They get set to take on Florida coming up later on this week on the road in Gainesville. Men's basketball did win their final regular season game as they'll head to Nashville for the SEC men's tournament coming up on Wednesday as the number 14 seed, as they'll take on Oklahoma in the late 9:30 tip on that one. And unfortunately, softball also did not win this weekend. They lost to Texas in 3 games. First 2 kind of closed. Third one kind of got out of hand. Texas against number 3 in the country. So that's always going to be a tough game no matter what. But all things considered, not a bad weekend overall for Gamecock sports.
Yeah, going off of what you said about the men's basketball team. Now let's preface it by my statement by saying this was not in any way, shape, or form a successful season. I mean, it did not go well at all.
Better than last year, technically.
However, yes, better than last year because their season still technically isn't over. They still have the SEC tournament coming up, but they doubled their conference wins from last year.
They did.
So, I mean, is that any positive point you can look at onto the year? Again, not a successful season in any way, shape, or form, but you won twice as many conference games as you did last year. So, is that a positive that you can take away?
Possibly, especially considering the fact that the team didn't give up down the stretch either. And I think that's what you worry about. We worried about it last year when Carolina started 0-13 in conference play. Like, is this team just going to throw in the towel and give up? And they didn't do that. In fact, won those games against Arkansas and Texas late in the season, played a very spirited game against Arkansas in the SEC men's tournament in the opening round. Again, Paris wasn't in trouble for being fired a year ago because they were only 1 year removed from the NCAA tournament. But maybe with the way they ended this season with a couple wins late, both against Mississippi teams, funny enough. I was joking earlier, I think they won the Mississippi State Championship, beat Southern Miss in overtime. They beat Mississippi State and Ole Miss in conference play. So if nothing else, you can claim you were the best team in the state of Mississippi if you happen to have been located there. So we're grasping at straws here, but that's something, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of go to your point. That is something. Now, how much is that statement worth? Not very much, but it is something. And to your point, again, that beating Mississippi State, that's one of the best wins of the year because Mississippi State's not a fantastic team, but dude, Josh Hubbard might be one of the best basketball players I've seen this year that no one talks about.
Yeah, no, he's good, and Carolina did what they needed to do to hold him in check for that game. And I'm looking at the seeding here based on getting my page to load, but I believe that would be that's the highest seeded team you'll have beaten this year because they are. You beat So because you beat LSU, you beat Mississippi State. No, Oklahoma. Oklahoma at 11 would be your biggest, highest seeded win based on the SEC tournament. So Again, what's that worth in the grand scheme of things? I don't know. It is worth noting, though, that you do have a pathway to maybe get yourself to the second round of the SEC tournament because you did beat Oklahoma. Now, if you get to play A&M in the second round, obviously we saw how that game went when they visited College Station earlier on this year, but you have the potential to maybe extend your trip out there in Nashville a little bit longer than what people expected you to be out there.
Yeah, and honestly, if you could just not be a first-round exit, that would be exceeding expectations, at least for the tournament. So, again, wouldn't be successful, but you would definitely exceed expectations and give people and really just give Gamecock fans like the thought process of, well, we didn't get bounced first round, and I'm happy about that.
Well, it would give people something, very small something, to feel somewhat optimistic about, I guess, if you were able to close out the regular season with a win, double your win total in conference play from last year. Again, it's not a whole lot, but it's something. And then maybe make it to the second round of the SEC tournament. And I'm building this up because all indications are that Lamont Paris is back next year. We've been talking about it a lot the past couple weeks, that, you know, the rumors that we hear, the national reporters that talk about this. Chris Lowe had an article over the weekend where he was talking about hot seats in men's basketball, or excuse me, Pete Nakos did talk about hot seats in men's basketball. And once again, he mentioned that he did not expect Lamont Paris to be fired. So I feel like we've kind of been softening the blow for this for a lot of people for the past handful of weeks. And I don't know if Donati puts something out today, if he waits until after the SEC men's tournament when South Carolina inevitably gets bounced, because I don't expect them to go out there and win 5 games in 5 days by any means. But if they get bounced in the first round or second round, then you say something to the effect of, hey, well, the season was disappointing, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and we're going to bring Lamont Paris back for 2026. Again, I feel like we've talked about it enough to where people aren't going to be shocked when that is probably the outcome that Donati gives for this season.
Yeah, I mean, Tyler, kind of back to your point, you said that you're not expecting them to go win 5 games in 5 days. I don't think anyone's expecting them to do that. Is it impossible? No, it's not impossible. I mean, in 2008, we saw Georgia do that.
That's right. That is, we just joked about that at the last year. That's the standard for everyone. Is like, hey, Georgia did it that year. NC State, as they were 11, 12 seed in the ACC tournament 2 years ago, and went on that run with DJ Burns and company. So we've seen it happen before. It's a lot to ask for.
Yeah, it's not impossible, but definitely a big ask. But if it's going to happen, if that did happen, I mean, you're kind of in a good spot to do it. You had a road win to end out the regular season. You've got a winnable game in the first round against a team. Yeah, has the seedings already been released? Are they playing Oklahoma?
Yeah, they're playing Oklahoma.
Okay, so you're playing against
that's
a team
official. It's the 14-11 game.
Okay, so you're playing against a team you beat earlier in the year, so you know that game is winnable too. Mm-hmm. So if you're able to win that, you're on a 2-game win streak, and you got a little bit of momentum. I mean, obviously, the only way that you make the postseason is if you win the whole thing, but for the small chance you have of that happening, you're in really the best spot you could be in.
Well, and I kind of look at South Carolina entering the SEC men's tournament in a lot of ways like we look at mid-majors or potential Cinderellas when they enter the NCAA tournament, that in any basketball game on a random day, any team can win depending on how the ball bounces or just how you're making your shots and that kind of stuff. So I don't doubt Carolina's ability to, A, beat a team like Oklahoma that they've already beaten this year, maybe even beating a team like A&M, but to win 5 games in 5 days, you're going to have to be consistent, and that's something that this team has not been this year from a three-point shooting standpoint, obviously, which was supposed to be a big part of their offense this year. They're obviously not good from a size standpoint, which has been a big reason why they've lost a lot of the games in the way that they've had, because they've just been out-physicaled and outsized by a lot of teams. So I don't doubt their ability to maybe win a game or two, but I just don't think it's feasible to expect them to go on this magical run when we haven't seen them be able to put together 5 straight games at any point this year, especially in conference play.
Yeah, I mean, and if even if you want the hope of doing that, there's things that have to happen that South Carolina isn't involved in. There's going to have to be some games that are won by teams that you won't expect to win, that Carolina has no control over. So that would give them the best chance. So that again, that's a shot. That's a long shot, and really you just got to worry about the game you've got up next, and that's Oklahoma. So that's really just the game that you really need to have your focus on.
Yeah. How cool was it for Michi, though, to get a No, it wasn't quite a buzzer beater because there was like half a second left, so the buzzer didn't go off the second it went in. But a game-winning shot there in the very last second on what is going to be his last regular season game as a Gamecock. Again, if they get bounced on Wednesday, that'll be his final game there. And I don't know what his future holds at the NBA level or international level or whatever it may be, but he's somebody that gutted it out here. He was a part of that tournament team 2 years ago, but most of his seasons here have not gone all that well. But he's been a team guy the entire way. He's never really given up or folded. And again, shows you on Saturday he's playing hard all the way to the very end. And I think that endears him to a lot of people here locally.
Yeah, that was kind of like a cinematic like script. Or like, or kind of like something you would see like that's written in like a WWE script or like a movie script. When I saw that and when I saw that highlight, it was just kind of. There's no really other way to describe it besides just that was perfect, kind of. And just because he even though he did transfer for a year, unless you live in Ohio, I feel like whenever you think of Michi Johnson, you think of South Carolina.
Sure.
So. It feels like he's had almost his entire career with the Gamecocks, and he has. And so just him being able to make a shot like that in a close game, because if you really think about it and you watch the game, the teams were dead even. I mean, that's really how it seemed. They were really dead even teams. They were dead even in the record perspective. So, yeah, I mean, just seeing something like that was just really perfect to every last detail and just really awesome to see as a Gamecock alum and just as a Gamecock fan.
Well, and pulling it up from 35, 40 feet, whatever it was, that's a Michi Johnson shot if there ever was one. So you knew he would be comfortable taking that kind of shot at the end of the game. Obviously, it went down. And again, in the grand scheme of things, is going to be remembered forever as one of the greatest moments in Gamecock history? No. But for the moment on Saturday to celebrate a win, the guys in the locker room were happy. There's a video of Lamont Paris dancing that we haven't gotten to see a whole lot this year. You can at least enjoy it for what it was, and a positive way to end the regular season nonetheless.
Yeah, again, you said that it wouldn't be really remembered very long in the grand scheme of things. That's correct. However, in my opinion, that was the moment of the season.
Yeah, and here's hoping they maybe have a moment or two out in Nashville. But again, I think everybody's kind of turning their attention to next year and the anticipation that Lamont Paris will be retained as the head coach for South Carolina. Again, we're kind of waiting on Jeremiah Donati to make that official probably sometime this week, and we'll obviously react accordingly to that when it does indeed happen. But it was a very busy weekend across all Gamecock sports, as I mentioned, including a 3-game set out at Founders Park, including a long day on Saturday. We'll get into what happened for the baseball team coming up next as the halftime show rolls along. Tyler Ed, Cale Wilson, along with you here on your Monday on the Game. Welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler Head, Kale Wilson along with you here on your Monday on the game. Again, Bill Gunner will be back in here coming up tomorrow. We'll still talk to Jamie Bradford as we do each and every Monday coming up at 2:15. Get his thoughts on what happened over the weekend, specifically at Founders Park as South Carolina takes down Princeton in all three games. Actually got to go to game number 1 on Saturday and hang out for a bit. And, Kale, you'll appreciate this. I got my first sunburn of 2026 hanging out there for a couple hours on Saturday.
Why'd you say I would appreciate that? What are you trying to say here?
Well, we are both people with fairer skin, so I feel like we burn pretty easily. And it's funny when you get your first one of the year, because this always happens to me. I never think about sunscreen until it's too late. Because, again, you're in the winter, you're wearing long sleeves and stuff like that. So even if you're outside on a sunny day, you don't really think about getting burned. And I was out there, and for that first game specifically, it was about 80 degrees. Not a ton of cloud cover until a little bit later in the game. And I looked down, like my legs are red, my arms are red. I'm like, oh, I'm getting a little bit cooked here. Let me go find some relief in the shade. And I spent about half the game standing beside one of the foul poles. Not one of the foul poles, one of the light poles on the third baseline side that was getting a fair amount of shade because where the sun was sitting behind it. So I ended up okay. It's not too bad, but yeah, there's something to be said about your first sunburn of the year.
You know what? That's actually really funny. I got my first sunburn on Saturday too.
Yeah.
That was Saturday morning. We had a what I don't remember what time it started. But you know, I coach high school lacrosse, and we had a game on at 9 a.m. Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
We had to be out on the field, I think, at 8 a.m., but we were out there probably until 11 or 11:30.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't horrible, but you could definitely tell I got a little bit of sun. But at least I didn't get sun poisoning.
Yeah, I've been there. That's extreme, and thankfully you don't have that, because that's certainly no fun at all. But it was a fun weekend for the Gamecocks. Again, picking up wins in all three games, 10-7, 4-3, and then 13-1 last night in 7 innings in a run rule over there at Founders Park. And here's my thing. We can get this conversation coming up. I want to kind of break down the individual games first off. And game number 1 on Saturday, you didn't have your best outing from Josh Gunther. And now he did show you how elite he can be the previous week against Clemson. Got knocked around a little bit, gave up a couple runs early on there. Didn't get super deep into the game because he threw a lot of pitches through those first 3 and the third innings. But when your pitching's struggling a little bit, that's where your offense needs to pick up, and that's what South Carolina was able to do, to put up 10 runs and pick up the victory. So, again, one side of your team kind of letting you down a little bit. The other side's able to pick up the slack, and that was good to see for game 1 on Saturday.
Yeah, people were really worried about the hitting, but 13 hits in a game is not something that people are going to complain about for sure. And that's always going to be a plus on the offensive side. And I feel like if you can do that almost every game, Gamecock fans will be a lot more satisfied.
Yeah, really kind of broke open there with let's see, the home run by Sutter in the 5th inning. No, Sutter's home run was the 4th inning. Scobie hits the home run to make it 5-5 in the 6th inning. And again, you did have some responses from Princeton there a little bit later on in the game, but it was the RBIs there in the bottom of the 7th, that really broke it open. So even when Princeton was able to score a couple runs there in the top of the 8th, you had a big enough advantage. You were able to go on and obviously win that game. And my concern with this offense, and this happened in both games on Saturday, is just kind of not getting out of the gate strong, right? Only a couple hits, no runs through the first couple of innings there. And then you kind of hit your stride. Once you get into the 4th and 5th, the kind of next step I want to see this offense take is being able to routinely hit in the early innings of games, drive guys in, to not find yourself in deficits, because that's what we were working in the early stages there on Saturday, was playing from behind a little bit. And if you want to win an SEC play, you can't put yourself in holes over and over again and expect to win series.
No, you can't, and because no disrespect intended towards Princeton when I say this, but Princeton's a lot different than playing SEC baseball.
Oh, they definitely are, and that is the one thing that I guess can bother you coming away from this weekend. And we talked about this on Friday going into the weekend series, that Princeton was a team that wasn't hitting the ball very well. They had a sub 200 average, I believe, hadn't put up a ton of runs in their, I think, 7 games they played between NC State and Duke. So it was a team that I thought Carolina wasn't going to have a problem with when it came to pitching, but obviously they were able to put up 11 runs over the course of the weekend, including 7 in that first game. So that wasn't great. Again, Josh Gunther didn't have his best outing. I don't think that changes your thought process of starting him coming up this weekend against Florida, because you saw how good he was this past week, or saw how good he was 2 weeks ago against Clemson, even though he struggled this past weekend. Now, if he struggles against Florida this upcoming weekend, then that can maybe be a different story. But you still have good stuff there. Valentin did give up a couple hits and a couple runs there, but he's still being looked at as one of your best guys to come in and close out games. But again, for that first game at least, your offense did enough to help you find a way to win, which again I think is going to be very important in conference play this year.
Yeah, and when you talk about conference play, I mean, it starts out rough, kind of. I mean, you play arguably the best team in the SEC, Florida, and that you basically get thrown into the fire. You're coming off a sweep against Princeton. Obviously, as I said, that's Princeton. Mm-hmm. You're expecting to sweep them, or at least you want to sweep them, but you were able to win all 3 games, and I think that was the first series sweep that Carolina's had. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Of this season, yes, that's correct.
Yes. So, I mean, you go in there with a little bit of momentum, and hopefully they do have a midweek game or two, right?
Yeah, they got Citadel tomorrow night. That'll be their last midweek game before Florida this upcoming weekend, which if you win that one, you would have gone 6-0 in the games between Clemson and Florida, which is what everybody was obviously hoping for. That doesn't tell you everything, but there is something to be said about winning the games you're supposed to win.
Well, last year, we know that they struggled in games like that. There were multiple games that they had that they just kind of fell flat on their face. So if they're able to just go 6-0 in the games between Clemson and Florida, at least they're starting to maybe move towards meeting expectations, at least in some aspects of the game. So, yeah, that's a positive.
And a little bit later on this hour, we'll get into the chaos of the SEC and how other teams have struggled up to this point, because that can maybe make you feel a little bit better about Carolina and the ups and downs it's had so far. But, again, we'll get to that a little bit later on in the show. Again, 4-3 win later in the afternoon on Saturday. Riley Goodman had a much better outing. Did throw a lot of pitches, so he didn't go deep into the game, but had a better outing compared to how he fared against Clemson the week before. Did give up a couple runs in those first couple of innings, but settled in and made those third and fourth innings pretty solid overall. And then Brandon Stone comes in and really locks things down there at the very end of the game, as he's kind of proven to be your best closer at this point. I know Valentin's got kind of the flash to him, but when you look at Stone's numbers, they are better in that regard, lower ERA and all that. I don't believe he's given up a run to this point as well either. So that's good to see, because obviously you're going to need good closeout pitching, when it comes to winning in the SEC. And then yesterday, even though he had to wait around all day and the game was delayed for a few hours, and finally first pitch was a 7:15, but run ruling anybody feels good. Again, it's Princeton, so you're not going to be, doing cartwheels about it. But it was nice to see them just have an offensive explosion and be able to have a go-away game like that in the third game of the series to wrap up the weekend on a positive note.
Yeah, again, I don't think it ever matters who you're playing. You can never really complain too much about a sweep.
Yeah. By the way, I love the run rule. I wish Major League Baseball had it. I said that the other day. We have it in the World Baseball Classic. I don't need to see the White Sox getting beat 25-2 by anybody. So if we could implement that at the Major League level, I wouldn't complain about it. But I'm glad we have it in college. And once Carolina got up, I think it was 8-1, then I'm cheering like, all right, let's go ahead and wrap this thing up. And then LeCroy hits the grand slam, which helps put them, over the top there. And then they're able to get the 1-2-3 top of the seventh and shut things down. So, yeah, good weekend overall. Again, fun weekend at the park. Appreciated, seeing some folks out there and, saying hello and all that. And hopefully this is a good sign of things to come, because, again, this community cares so much about this baseball team. And it's been rocky to start with, but if you can go out there and figure out things in Gainesville and manage to take 2 out of 3, then I think some of that confidence will start to creep back in a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
So, we'll get into what Coach Maneri had to say after the game. Also look at some other statistics as well from over the weekend as we look ahead to to Florida coming up the end of this week. But Citadel first coming up next. That's tomorrow night at 7 o'clock right here on 107.5 The Game. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head and Cale Wilson hanging out with you here on your Monday on The Game. Time right here for our friends over at Canty Foundation Specialists. I tell you about it all the time, but I'll remind you once again, you always need to be on the lookout for things around your home that are a little bit off. Things that include cracks in your exterior brick, cracks in windows and door frames, cracks above windows and door frames, uneven or bouncy floors, or cracks over your garage door. If you notice any of these problems with your home, you could have serious foundation issues, and that's where our friends over at Canty Foundation Specialists come in. Go online to schedule an appointment today at cantycanfixit.com. They'll send a professional out to your home to evaluate those foundation issues and get them fixed right so you and your family can live worry-free going forward. Again, go online to schedule your appointment today over at cantycanfixit.com. Let our friends at Canty Foundation Specialists help you out with your foundation needs. All right, welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler Head, Kale Wilson, along with you here on your Monday on the Game. Again, very busy weekend for Gamecock Sports. Talking baseball as of right now, as they were able to successfully take all three games against Princeton over the weekend, including the Run Rule 13-1 victory last night over the Tigers of the Ivy League. Let's get into some sound here from Coach Maneri. Kale, first, this is going to be cut number 13 as he talked about going 5-0 this past week.
Nice to finish off a week going 5-0. I challenged the guys at the beginning of the week, and we had some tough games during the course of this week, but we found a way to prevail and get our record back to something that's respectable. And more importantly than even the record is, I just feel like our team is growing, getting better, and obviously the story tonight was Amp. He pitched great, like I know he can. And we got a bunch of clutch hits today. Several guys came through with big hits, and it was nice to have a bit of an offensive explosion, and took a lot of pressure off our bullpen today, which was a good thing.
Kale, we kind of alluded to this a moment ago. Beating Upstate, beating Charleston Southern, taking 3 against Princeton, even beating the Citadel tomorrow night to win the 6 games between Clemson and Florida doesn't make anybody feel tremendously better. Right now, I was noting the accomplishments of the offense from this past weekend, which is good, but still everybody's in wait-and-see mode of how you do that against teams in the SEC. But there is something to be said about going out there and doing your job, because while we don't feel better about them winning these games, we'd feel a whole lot worse if they lost to Upstate, if they lost 2 out of 3 against Princeton and then dropped a game, to Citadel tomorrow night, and then you're suddenly 2-4 in those 6 games instead of 6-0. So while it's not a fix-all, it is certainly a, hey, we could be worse off. So good on you for handling your business.
Well, I think going into these 5 games, Gamecock fans really thought, okay, there's a possibility we could lose 1 or 2 of these, especially after they lost to Queens a week or 2 ago.
Right.
And so when you end up handling business and winning all 5 of them after falling to a team like Queens, and again, no disrespect towards them, but you're South Carolina, you shouldn't be falling to Queens University. So. That makes you feel a little better, and it kind of shows that you're kind of approaching these games differently, and you're finally starting to take care of business as a program like in the SEC like South Carolina should.
A couple more things here from Coach Maneri. This will be cut number 17, talking about the team's good plate discipline, particularly in game number 3.
I was talking to Scott Bradley before the game, and he was telling me about this kid that was pitching for him tonight. He was a good athlete. He hit in both games yesterday, played the outfield, I think, in one of them. And he has a good arm. This kid, I don't know how many innings he went, but he shut out North Carolina State on the road. And I don't know, I thought we just had some really terrific at-bats against him, made him work, didn't chase a lot of bad pitches. And when we got good pitches to hit, we did a lot of damage. And we got some big hits early in the game. Bach came through with a big 2-run single with the bases loaded. And, obviously Sutter was great again tonight. It's so exciting for me to see him swinging the bat now like we knew he was capable of doing. And, I just thought we had a lot of terrific at-bats today, hit the ball hard a lot. And, good sign going forward.
Yeah, definitely a good sign going forward. Again, when you put up 13 runs, only struck out twice in a game, that's obviously a good sign, because plate discipline was something this team struggled with a season ago, striking out a lot, not drawing a ton of walks, and when you couple that with not hitting for a ton of power, that's obviously going to be an issue. So hopefully it's a good sign of things to come. He mentioned Logan Sutter there, and this has kind of been the story of this team for the past handful of games. Is here's a guy that came in as this great explosive hitter from Purdue that in the preseason wasn't showing a whole lot. Now that he's kind of finally starting to hit his stride when he's been in the lineup, because he hasn't been in the lineup for every single game here as of late, he's tearing the cover off of the ball. And when you look at his numbers from over the weekend, 6 of 10 with 7 RBIs and a home run in each of those games. But I look at his last 6 games that he's played in, 10 of 20, 10 RBIs and 4 home runs during that stretch. Like, you really can't ask for much more out of a guy than what he was able to do there. And I think he's going to continue to be a focal point of this lineup if he can continue to keep hitting like this.
Yeah, and you really wish you would have hit his stride going in the Clemson series, but now that's over. It's outside of that. There's no really better time to hit your stride than going into conference play and hoping that you can just keep that momentum and hoping that you can keep that going when it really matters most now.
Yeah, and it is It's an odd dynamic because I feel like Maneri's kind of had a short leash for him when it comes to mistakes, at second base or base running and that kind of stuff of like pulling him really quickly. But man, when he's hitting the ball like this, look, if he lets a ball get by him in the field, I'll let it go because of how well that he's hitting the baseball. Obviously, want to see him continue to improve in those areas, but he's finally living up to being the player that we thought he was going to be coming into the year. And if he can continue to hit like this, I'm excited to see what he's going to be able to do in conference play. You couple that with LeCroy, who had another solid weekend, obviously hit the Grand Slam yesterday to help elevate South Carolina to that run roll victory. Scobie, a really strong weekend. You mentioned Tyler Bach, who had some clutch hits, including yesterday as well. So again, it's Princeton, so you take it all with a grain of salt considering the quality of the opponent, but I hope this is good sign for things to come, that you're going to be able to have production up and down your lineup, because you're going to need that against the best pitching you'll see the entire season coming up here in a couple weeks.
Tyler, do my ears deceive me? Are you really saying that there could be some room for error with how he's been performing?
In terms of Logan Sutter?
Yes.
Well, not too much error. But again, if you tell me he's going to go out there and go 3 for 3 with 3 RBIs and have an error at second base, I'll say, you know what, Eric's second base is not great, but that production at the plate, I'll take it, right? So you want to see him to continue to improve, but it is just kind of a weird dynamic that I've noticed between him and Maneri, that it is a little bit shorter leash than everybody. Maybe it's because the standard for him, the expectations for him are so high, considering what he was doing at the plate, and he wasn't doing that early on in the season. But now that he is, we'll see if that kind of smooths over between them, or if there's still that kind of odd dynamic. We'll obviously have to see. But great weekend for him. Again, 3 home runs, 1 in each game this past weekend, which you're going to need if you're going to continue to put up runs when conference play starts here soon. I also thought over the weekend, Riley Goodman's start was very important as well. Here's a guy that, the last time we saw him prior to Saturday was on the road at Clemson in a pivotal Game 3 where he needed to win that game to win the series. He got knocked around, had trouble finding the zone and all that. I thought his command was better on Saturday. He did walk a couple guys there in the 4th inning that eventually led to him getting pulled. Did give up a couple runs in the first 2 innings as well. But for the most part, I thought he was able to keep his composure pretty decently, and I thought it was a good confidence builder that he still went out there and won the game and didn't look too erratic, because, again, he seems to be a guy that they're determined to keep in this rotation. That's going to be very important, that he keeps that confidence up as this season goes along, and especially as you get into like this upcoming weekend, pitching down in Gainesville, got Georgia in a couple weeks, so he's going to be going into more intimidating environments. So it's good to hopefully get another confidence booster like Saturday was for him out of the way.
Yeah, one of the biggest things in baseball is if anything ever goes wrong, you have to have a short memory. You can't let it affect you, because you get all bummed out, and next thing you know, you're pitching again, or you're batting again, or you're out on the field again, or you got another game tomorrow or in a couple of days, and so you really just have to completely forget about it and just keep going and make up for it.
Well, and pitching especially is such a mental part of the game as too, and pitchers are head cases, as I like to say a lot. I don't know, are you a Braves fan?
Yeah, I am.
Do you remember the wild card game in 2019 against St. Louis where Foltynewicz got shelled for like 6 runs in the first inning?
Do we have to talk about this?
Oh, I bring it up because it was a mental thing, and he didn't recover from that. He was off the entire, and I know COVID made things funky the next year, but he wasn't even the same, going into that next year. I don't even know where Foltynewicz is now, but like that affected him in a lot of ways, and that's pitching for you, because it is such a mental game. You have to be perfect. Jack and I talked about it last Friday because he had Ethan Carter, former Gamecock pitcher, on his GC Live show. That was kind of talking about, hey, it seems like Goodman's trying to force things. He's trying to be too perfect. He's trying to aim pitches, and that's where he's making his mistakes. And on Saturday, he looked more relaxed. Obviously, still room for improvement. Did walk a couple guys there at the very end in the 4th inning, so still things to work on, but I thought it was a good confidence builder, if nothing else, for him.
Yeah, and let's be honest, there's always going to be room for improvement.
Sure.
For any baseball player, really. It's really hard to, it's almost, I personally think it's dang near impossible to be perfect and have no room for improvement in the game of baseball. But, if all you really can say about the guy is, there's room for improvement, then he's doing a dang pretty good job.
Definitely so. And again, it's been an up and down season to start for South Carolina, but a lot of other teams in the SEC having their own struggles as well. We'll dive into some of the things that have happened to other teams in the conferences, including ones that South Carolina will see on their schedule this year to wrap up hour number 1 of the halftime show. Tyler Head and Cale Wilson on your Monday on the Game. All right, welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Kale Wilson along with you here on your Monday, wrapping up hour number one. Elijah Campbell going to jump in here with us for the 1 o'clock hour. Talk some women's basketball as he was out there on location out in Greenville watching the South Carolina women unfortunately lose in their final game over the weekend against Texas. 78-61, just weren't able to recover from a slow start early in that game. So we'll get his perspective of being there in person. Also talk some men's basketball with him too, as we'll loop back around to what Coach Paris's team did over the weekend out there in Ole Miss, and look ahead to the SEC men's tournament coming up later on this week. But we're talking about Gamecock baseball as of right now. And look, it's been an up and down season so far. South Carolina's had some losses that nobody will excuse to teams like Northern Kentucky and Army. Obviously, dropped the series against Clemson the prior weekend, though this past weekend and past week have gone the way that you wanted it to. But everybody's already obviously turning their sights into SEC play. And, Kale, it's been really interesting when you look around the SEC because while people here locally are concerned with what South Carolina has done, there's been a lot of teams in the SEC that have also put up some questionable results. And LSU, who was number 2 going into the weekend, they drop a series to a not great Sacramento State team. They've lost to teams like Northeastern, Louisiana Lafayette, who is pretty good, as well as McNeese in the midweek. They're kind of scuffling. Florida, who South Carolina is going to play later on this week, they dropped their first 2 games against High Point and needed a walk-off, 12 runs to beat them in their 3rd game on Sunday. So while there's certainly a high level of concern here, and rightfully so, they're not the only team in the SEC that is not performing to the standard that they hoped they would.
Well, I can guarantee you there is a guy in the state of Louisiana who is probably one of the most hated people in the state of Louisiana. There was a guy on Twitter, and his name, I guess, is Dr. Jones, and he posted a tweet on November 23rd of 2025 saying, "I'll sacrifice our entire baseball season for Lane Kiffin." LSU ended up hiring Lane Kiffin to be their next football coach. And then what happens? LSU starts losing to McNeese 6-7.
They had to do it.
Yeah, I had to do it. 6-7. And then they lose to a team like Northeastern, and then they lose to Louisiana Lafayette, and now they just dropped their series to Sacramento State after winning the first game. And Dr. Jones then tweets something a few days ago of a Breaking Bad gif of I think it's Walter, the bald guy.
Yep.
Where he's just like dropping his mouth open like, and he says, "What have I done?"
I'm a very superstitious person, so when those kind of things get thrown out there, I very much like to follow them. We all remember the Florida State fan that promised to eat dog poop a couple years ago if they had lost to, I think, that Labor Day game against Duke, and then they've kind of been cursed ever since. So be very careful. And I go back to this a lot, too, because we talk about the struggles of men's sports here at South Carolina for basically the last 15 months. I wonder, did one of you out there that's listening right now make some kind of promise as South Carolina was going to score to win against Clemson in football back in 2024 that you haven't been able to pay back? Because it's been pretty rough for men's sports since then, and I would not be the least bit shocked if there was some kind of, not the chicken curse, some kind of new curse put on this team from one of you making some kind of promise at that point in time.
Yeah, that's why I don't make promises and post them on the internet, because if that happens, or say I'll trade this for this, because I always know there's a possibility that will happen, and I also know that it could come back to bite me, and people could always say, "Hey, so you said you'd do this if this happened, so let's see you pay up."
My thing too is like when you're a kid and you have a birthday party and they tell you to make a wish and blow out the candles, and you're not supposed to tell people the wish or else it won't come true. I feel like it's the same thing when it comes to like putting stuff on the internet, like, oh, I wish for this, or I did this superstitious thing. If you're putting it out, like, I will never tell you my superstitions, right? Because if I tell you them, then they're not going to work anymore. Like, that's my belief on how those things work. So yeah, if you're posting about it online, it might work in the short term, but it's going to come back to bite you eventually.
You know, one of my things growing up, was, because I grew up both a South Carolina and a Georgia fan, which
Right.
sounds crazy, I know, but Whenever Georgia would play Alabama, you know they don't have a very good track record historically.
Right.
Even though they won the last matchup, I would always go into that game thinking that Georgia would lose, because if I ever thought that they would win, I would get my hopes up, and then I would just be so mad at the end of the day, at the end of the game. I kind of would do that with both South Carolina or Georgia. If they ever played a big game, I would tell myself they're going to lose so I wouldn't get my hopes up, and hopefully that would make them win the game.
Expect nothing and hope you're wrong.
Exactly.
Is kind of the mindset
That's exactly
of that.
my mindset.
Which I feel like that's a lot of the way people are looking at this Carolina baseball team. And look, you know, those other teams in the SEC that I just mentioned there were ranked for reasons starting the season. So I think that gives their fan base a little more pause, like, hey, it's not going well right now, but we know we're a better team than that, as opposed to Carolina, where you were already kind of upset going into the year as a fan base, and now not seeing the results right away that you want to see makes you that much more uncomfortable. And we'll see what happens in conference play, but I still think that there's ability to improve. How much, I don't know, but this weekend's going to tell us a whole lot about how good this team is.
Yeah, we're about to learn a lot about how good this team is, and I can't. You know what? I didn't think I would be saying this a couple weeks ago, but I'm actually really excited to see how this game goes.
I am too. Again, you got to get through the Citadel in the midweek, and Maneri obviously was baited with the Florida question yesterday. They wasn't going to take until after they beat the team from out on the coast coming up tomorrow. But yeah, we'll turn our attention to Florida a little bit later on in the week, and what's going to be a very pivotal series. And hopefully Carolina can follow the blueprint that High Point laid out this past weekend and be able to take a couple games from them down in Gainesville. 1 hour in the books. Hour number 2, we'll get into what happened with women's basketball over the weekend, as they unfortunately fell in the final game of the SEC women's tournament, but have their sights set on much bigger goals ahead with the NCAA tournament coming up here soon. Elijah Campbell going to join us on the other side here on The Game. All right, welcome back in. Hour number 2. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Cale Wilson hanging out with you here on the game, and going to be joined for the next little bit by our guy Elijah Campbell from the early game. A year older Elijah Campbell at that, turned 31 yesterday. I know the results on the court weren't exactly what you wanted for celebrating a birthday, but other than that, hopefully it went well.
Oh, it was great. I still ultimately got to, get out pretty early, get back into Columbia, have the only thing that I really wanted for on my birthday, which is a fat plate of nachos and some margaritas. And you know what? We got to accomplish that. So to me, that was the whole barometer for success on a birthday weekend. So I'll take it.
It is funny as you get older, how things simplify for things like birthdays where, you're turning 21. I want to go bar hopping, want to do this, want to do that. And 31, you're like, man, give me a plate of nachos and a margarita and I'll be satisfied.
Elijah, what was the...
Yep, I have certainly reached that.
What was the restaurant of choice?
It was El Jimador in West Columbia.
Can never go wrong with El Jimador, man.
2 thumbs up.
Yeah,
highly recommend. Would do again.
I'll have to. I'm a nacho connoisseur myself. I'll have to give those a try. And I'm not opposed to margaritas either.
Oh, well, that was a good place for him, I will say. There's a lot of great places in town. Your options truly are limitless, but that was, highly recommend. That's one of the go-tos for us.
Well, there may have been some people that may have used a margarita to drown their sorrows from the results of the SEC Women's Tournament Final yesterday. You always like to say when you're doing those post-game videos and stuff that you're reporting from the scene of the crime. Unfortunately, yesterday, South Carolina was a victim of that crime as they allowed Texas to get out to the 14-0 lead off of the back of 5 turnovers, only 1 shot in about the first 5 minutes of the game, and really, you couldn't really recover after that. If you only played the last 35 minutes of that game, it's probably pretty close and competitive. But when you spot any team, especially one as good as Texas, 14 points, that's going to be a tough hill to climb, and Carolina wasn't able to overcome that.
Yeah, that first 5-minute stretch, Tyler, from tip-off till that first TV timeout really defined this game. And it's silly to ever say that a team won the game in the first 5 minutes, but you can always feel like a team lost a game in the first 5 minutes. And that certainly seemed like the case. Like, that was the ultimate, come out of the gates swinging, and look, you mentioned it, only 1 shot attempt in about the first 5 minutes of that game too. In that 14-0 run to begin the game, Carolina only got 1 shot attempt, and then on the other side, Texas was 7 for 7. And that's exactly how that's going to go, because it wasn't just that. Texas was hitting some tough shots early, which they were. A couple of them were good, tough contested shots. But man, it felt, I've never seen, I guess, a team overwhelm a Dawn Staley coach South Carolina team like that. It felt like they were overwhelmed, and it felt like Texas went into this game knowing exactly what was going to happen from tip-off for the first 5 minutes, and they just played to it. And it was really, in terms of dishing out, credit in this game, that Texas coaching staff and those players for executing that game plan really sold it out and won it in the first 5 minutes of that game.
And I think it really speaks volumes to how high of expectations we place on Dawn Staley teams, that even into the late, fourth quarter, I was expecting, hey, at some point, they're going to put up a brick wall in front of Texas, and Carolina's going to go on some kind of crazy 15-2 run and put themselves back in that game, because we've just seen this kind of stuff happen so many times. Maybe not necessarily that big of a deficit that late in the game, but even when Carolina, that was the thing about the team a year ago, right, was they were getting off the bus really sluggish. Remember the Clemson and Vanderbilt games were kind of so-so in the first half, and then they just put their foot on the gas in the second half and were able to pull away. And, Texas is a different animal because of how good they are, but I was just kind of waiting for that moment. They got it down to 9 a couple times in the second quarter, but Texas never let them go on any kind of extended run before they would go down and answer on the other end. So there was just no breathing room. And again, if you start off the game better, don't turn the ball over and match some of those shots that Texas has, maybe you still lose, but it certainly would have been a lot closer game when it was all said and done.
Oh, you certainly would have felt better about it, right? I mean, it's one thing to maybe lose a game like that to a top 4 Texas team who's going to be a 1 seed in this NCAA tournament. And if it's a 1 or 2 possession game, hey, hard fought battle, got beat. But it's not that way, because you end up losing by double figures, and you trailed by double figures for a majority of the game. And so much of that was just from what happened at the very beginning of the game, and a lot of things being even after that. But the other thing that really impressed me about Texas, Tyler, was that every time South Carolina did maybe chip it away and get back down to 9, or make, go a couple possessions of scoring and then getting a couple stops, and the whole building maybe felt that South Carolina was getting themselves back in that game because, credit to the Gamecock fans, man. It was loud in there the entire game, and that was a game in which their team trailed by double digits for a majority of that game. But it felt like something might have been turning a little bit. But anytime you had that remote feeling, Jordan Lee would knock down a jumper, or Madison Booker would get to the basket and get an and one, or hit a mid-range jumper. Texas just seemingly had an answer for everything. And I think that was one of the more impressive things in this game, is because you do see so many ebbs and flows throughout a game of basketball. The whole saying, basketball is a game of runs thing is completely true. And Texas delivered a kill shot in the first 5 minutes and never allowed South Carolina to deliver theirs. And I think that is, when looking at Texas and their prospects for the NCAA tournament, it's one of those things that is, I guess, maybe makes them more impressive to you with how they were able to do this over the course of 4 quarters, even when it felt like things might start changing a little bit, especially with this team that we cover, that we have seen them do this before, right? And be able to erase those leads and keep themselves in basketball games. And we just didn't see that materialize at all.
I've been here probably about 6 or so months longer than you have, and I know in my time here, I think this is only the 8th or 9th loss for South Carolina women that I've actually gotten to talk about, because it's such a rare type of thing. Obviously, the 3rd one this year, but I feel like every time we do see them lose a game, the message is always kind of, and non-necessarily alluded to us after the game, like, all right, this is kind of your motivating tool going forward. You're on a long winning streak, or your past handful of games, and maybe you start thinking you're invincible again, and this kind of brings you back down to earth and humbles you. And again, I can't think of a better time for that than starting the NCAA tournament coming up here in a week and a half, because we know what Carolina is capable of. And again, this is a Texas team that they beat a handful of weeks ago in conference play. Obviously lost to them on that last second shot by Rory Harmon going back to Thanksgiving. So that team is not 17 points better than you. You just played a bad game on Sunday. And I don't know if you're going to see them at some point down the line again or not. We'll see how the brackets end up shaking out and how both teams fare in the tournament. But, the funny thing about Carolina is they are capable of going and running roughshod over every opponent they have from here until the beginning of April, or they could run into an LSU or somebody in the Elite Eight, depending on how the brackets shake out, and not even make the Final Four. Like, that's how, not wishy-washy is the right word, but how the different variables this team has this year, it seems like.
Oh, yeah. And we've seen, I guess a common theme in the losses is normally you're missing out on opportunities. In the Oklahoma game, it felt like you missed way too many opportunities at the basket, missing way too many shots. First Texas loss, missing way too many shots around the basket. And you were getting a lot of those opportunities that you wanted, and you just weren't converting on them, right? And then you can kind of chalk that up to, hey, bad roll, off the rim, some maybe bad negative basketball luck. But in the game yesterday, I think that's the first time that I think I've seen South Carolina get held to under 20 shot attempts at the rim. So many times this year, when we're looking at the number of times that they have shots at the basket, I'm usually talking about the percentage being like 22 for 30 or 24 for 30, always getting around that 30 mark. And this is the first time this year, or at least the first time in months, I would say, that you were held to under 20 attempts at the rim, and then you also left 11 points in the free throw line. That's what kills you right there. You can look at defensive game plan and say, okay, if we, that first 5-minute stretch where they hit a couple tough shots, we can just account for them hitting, a couple of baskets because they're a really good team. But offensively, you could have won in a shootout. You could have won this game in the 70s if you didn't leave all those points off the board when you missed 8 layups in the game, or when you missed 11 free throws in the game. Say you just, you only miss a couple of free throws and you a couple of those layups. Again, a completely different game, and we're not even talking about a double-digit loss. I think when you put this thing in perspective, too, if you're Don, you're trying to make that point and say, look, sometimes the only team that can beat us is us, and we beat ourselves. Give Texas credit, but there was a lot of beating ourselves in that game, and you're going to face teams that are as good as Texas once you do get deep enough into this tournament. And I think, you could also point to that example of, what was it, 2021, 2022, where you lose the SEC championship game in Nashville against a really good Kentucky team. And they used the fuel from that loss and end up winning a national title. Like, this can be done. You have an entire week. That's the beauty of the women's tournament, is that you have an entire week from Championship Sunday to Selection Sunday, and then you have Selection Sunday where you know who your opponent is, and then you're not playing until Friday or Saturday for that first round game. There's a real beauty to that, and I think that's an advantage that this team is going to get to have to be able to regroup and recuperate and then try to make this run.
Well, when you play a team like Texas or a UCLA or UConn, whoever you end up getting in the tournament, obviously all of your star players usually need to step up, and that's something else that stood out to me about this loss to Texas yesterday is when you look at Tania Latson and Tessa Johnson, they combined for only 12 points. They were 3 of 10 from the field. They missed 5 total free throws themselves. We talked about Tessa going into the weekend as she was on a little bit of a cold streak, kind of picked it up against Kentucky and LSU in those first couple games. But again, yesterday, Texas was able to limit both of those girls to not being the high-level producers that they usually are. And in a game as important as that one, when you take away 2 of those scoring threats, that can be enough to beat a team like South Carolina.
Certainly. And I think one reason why Texas was really good at doing that in this game is because a lot of those shots from Tania or Tessa got blocked at the basket. I mean, you look at the numbers, they combined 3 for 10, and they were 1 for 4 from 3, meaning they shot 6 twos. And I can recall on both instances, Tessa getting a shot blocked by a help side defender in the first half of the game. And I can remember in the second half, Tania Latson going in amongst 2 defenders and getting blocked by about 2 different players, right? So it's one of those deals too where it's a game where I think Carolina's guards, they knew what they had to do. There was a lack of execution there, and there's not a lot of teams that are going to be able to have the front court that Texas has, and that's what makes that really difficult. Is you're not going to run into, or not, maybe not difficult, understandable is that you're not going to run into a team in the first round, second round, Sweet 16, maybe Elite 8 that has the type of front court play and physicality that Texas has. You're just not going to see that pretty frequently, and that should be able to give Gamecock fans some solace, but that should tell you that whenever that does happen and you do get to that point, you got to be better at finishing over the trees and finishing through contact, or else you can end up having the same result where your 2 of your leading guards end up having small point totals. And I think one of the things that kill you, Tyler, is you only had 1 starter in double figures. And we can point to a lot of different things in this game, but Joyce being the only starter scoring in double figures kills you. And when it comes to explaining why that happened, I think it was an inability of Tessa and Tania to not have their best games, have their best legs, to be able to convert on some of those 2-point baskets.
We'll get into other things that happened over the weekend for the women, as well as look ahead to the latest bracketology as we await Selection Sunday coming up this weekend. It is the halftime show. Tyler Ed, Kale Wilson, Elijah Campbell hanging out for a little bit here on your Monday on the Game.
Yeah, I mean, our team knows we didn't play our best basketball, not nearly what we're capable of doing, and told them that the last time we lost in this situation, we won the national championship. So you got to think about that. It might be the very thing this team needs. It's not what I would think, yesterday coming in today, but now that we're here and it's a reality, you search for things that have a connection that can give your team what it needs to make this run for a national championship. I do think we have enough in the room to do that. We'll rest and recoup at the end of the month, at the end of the week, and start that journey.
Welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyrod, Cale Wilson, Elijah Campbell hanging out for a bit here, talking some hoops. That, of course, Dawn Staley about the message to her team in the locker room after they fall to Texas in the SEC Women's Tournament Final. As she mentioned there, first time they've lost that game since 2022 against Kentucky. They will go on to win that national championship, of course, and we hope the same results end up being netted here in about a month's time as we get into the NCAA tournament. And, it's interesting. As we talk about this being a motivating factor for this team and them kind of relocking in, I feel like it's one of those things where Dawn doesn't have to scream until she's red in the face or make them run suicides or anything like that in practice to make them learn their lesson. Like, they know the standard they're being held to. They know how good they're capable of being, and losing to any team by double digits is not okay by South Carolina standards. And I feel like this team it's not going to be hard to remotivate this team to lock back in for the tournament coming up here in a week and a half.
Hard to remotivate them. And what I think maybe the best thing is, Tyler, is that you're almost going to have 2 weeks until you play a game again, right? I think that fact of you play this game on Sunday, you have an entire week of practicing with that loss simmering. Then you have the selection Sunday. You're going to find out who you're going to play. And then you have another, 5 days or so of preparing for that game and your assistant coaches scouting, the 8-9 game. That is just all that is just almost 2 full weeks of letting one loss simmer, right? And I think being able to stew on that, understanding that, hey, if we don't play our best game, we can get beat. And we've seen this team respond from adversity really well, right?
Right.
We saw this team, bounce back after that first Texas loss, go through conference play pretty good until play with fire a couple times, and then you go to Oklahoma and Norman, you miss a bunch of layups, you miss some free throws, you fall apart in overtime, and then the playing with fire got you burnt, and then we saw this team reel off not just wins, Tyler, we saw them reel off blowout wins against top 25 teams, and you saw them, so even top 5, top 10 teams, like with Vanderbilt, right? Like what we saw them do to Vanderbilt Colonial Life Arena was an absolute evisceration, and that was when I kind of felt, oh, this team's back. Right? Like this team's back again. Like they've learned that lesson. So we've seen them bounce back from losses too. That's why, I got a tweet yesterday asking me if this makes me concerned for the NCAA tournament. Not really, solely because, I've seen so many instances in men's and women's college basketball where you lose a conference title game and you might not look really good, but you end up regrouping, especially in women's college basketball, just because of that week off. You do end up regrouping and maybe you overachieve, after that, right? You end up, going to the national championship game or winning the national title. And that team that you saw on the Sunday of your conference championship, or in some conferences the Saturday, is a completely different team than what you end up seeing in the big dance, right? And I think this could certainly be the case for this team.
I think, again, what we've seen out of the team this year with now the 3 losses they've had is just kind of pointing out that maybe they're more vulnerable than some of the other teams in years past have been going into the tournament. Go back to 2 years ago when they last won the national championship, we were perfect, save for having to hit basically a buzzer-beating 3 against right. Tennessee. The team wasn't really touched by pretty much anybody, so you knew they were going to be able to hold their own in the tournament no matter who they faced, and obviously went on to cruise to a pretty comfortable national championship win there against Iowa when it was all said and done. This time around, again, is a little more concerning, and again, nobody is doubting the ability of Dawn Staley to go on a tear and blow out every opponent from now until the beginning of April, but as you get into these tougher matchups, assuming you're making it into the Elite Eight and the Final Four, you could slip up against UCLA. You could slip up against Oklahoma again, depending on how the brackets end up working out, because we've seen this team not be perfect on more than one occasion. Again, having shots blocked, not being able to grab rebounds against certain teams. Certain players' injuries have obviously been a big part of this team this year that could rear their ugly head as the tournament goes along. So, again, nobody's saying that they can't win the national championship, but I think you have a heightened level of concern that they are perhaps the most vulnerable they've been going in a while.
Yeah, I think last year's team made us forget about a lot of some of the flaws that they had, because I think last year's team going into the tournament, they just breezed through the SEC. That when they did get to the second round against Indiana, where it looked like they struggled to find offense late in games or early in games, and ended up having the game be a lot closer. And we saw the same thing against Maryland and Duke in the Sweet 16 and Elite Eight. That's really when that started showing a lot of what the weakness might have been offensively. I think that with it this year, the one thing that does give me concern, like actual concern, I think everything else is fine. I don't think you're going to have a lot of games, if any, where you only have one starter in double figures. I think that may be more of an anomaly than anything else. I think front court depth, specifically when it comes to rebounding, like I think Alicia Tornabese could be a really good basketball player for this program. I think Miriam Dowda, when she is coming to the game sometimes, has done some good things. But I think the first half against LSU highlighted that if Medina gets in foul trouble, then you had a really hard time rebounding the ball. That was, if you want to take that game, for example, LSU grabbed 8 offensive rebounds, which is 40% of their missed shots in that first half. And Medina only played a handful of minutes. I believe she only played 7 minutes in that first half because she picked up 2 early fouls. And when she wasn't on the floor, LSU got what they wanted when it came to getting second chance points. Now, the second half happens. Medina doesn't pick up any fouls, and she's able to play with a little more freedom. And LSU from that point on only grabs 2 offensive rebounds. And I don't think it's any coincidence that the team that was, or the player on the court that had the highest plus minus of any player for South Carolina was Medina Okot at plus 15. When she was on the floor, they dominated LSU. And, usually Dawn Staley coach teams, it's not a one player makes the biggest difference type deal, but there was that night, right? And if you don't get a Del Tac back, then you do kind of miss that rebounding element off the bench. And that might be something that can be a little bit of a curious case, or something to look at as to what can trip them up here in the NCAA tournament, depending what the draw is. There are plenty of 2 seeds, I think, that could get you trouble in the Elite Eight because they have really high, rebounding ability. So a lot of that's going to depend on the draw too. But for the most part, I mean, if I had to put it on a scale of 1 to 10 about how concerned I would be if I'm a Gamecock fan going into the NCAA tournament, I'm probably putting it at just 3. Mm-hmm. Not ideal that's the last, like the last taste you have in your mouth before the big dance, for sure. But there are just a couple things here or there that might be like, okay, that could get you. But for the most part this year, we haven't seen a ton of that. I don't think what Texas did defensively can be replicated by just anybody. Like not anybody has a Rory Harmon who can chase your point guard up and down the floor for 94 feet, right? Right. Not everybody has a slew of bigs off the bench who can play physical and be able to block a ton of shots. That's a uniquely Texas or UCLA type thing, or in UConn. Maybe not so much the bigs with UConn, but with just a bunch of players with pure basketball skill. I mean, there's something that Texas was able to bring to the table that gave you a ton of trouble yesterday that just nobody else outside of a handful or a small handful of teams can actually bring out and play with you.
And there was significance to the game yesterday, not only for the purposes of winning the SEC women's tournament, but also the projected seeding for the NCAA tournament as well. As there's no threat that Carolina was going to fall out of being a 1 seed, but per Charlie Kareem's latest update as of last night, and we usually kind of take what he says to end up being the truth when it comes to what the tournament bracket's actually going to look like. You went from being in Region 3 and going to Fort Worth to now potentially being in Region 4, going out there to Sacramento. So longer haul, obviously tougher for fans to get out there and all that kind of stuff. It also changes the matchup you would have in terms of which bracket you line up with, being UConn or UCLA, and we'll see how that seeding ends up shaking out, though we expect UConn to end up being the number 1 overall seed. So there was a lot on the line yesterday, and unfortunately the road, despite being a number 1 seed, is going to be a little bit tougher for Carolina because of losing that game.
Yeah, certainly. And I think Preston and I discussed this morning a little bit. if you're going to be the 4th 1 seed, which I think is fair, right? I mean, if it comes down to who's the 3rd and 4th 1 seeds and the options are Texas and South Carolina, their resumes are comparable enough to where I think you can take the 3 head-to-head matchups and say, okay, we'll give that edge to Texas. Completely fair, especially considering how Texas won the game yesterday. And Preston and I were discussing whether or not you would want UConn to be the number 1 overall seed or UCLA. Because if I'm not mistaken, UCLA beat Iowa by damn near 50 points.
Yeah, they obliterated them.
Points, yeah, in that Big Ten title game, and they've won 18 Quad 1 games this year. I've never seen a basketball team at any level, Tyler Head, win 18 Quad 1 basketball games. That is ridiculous, and I think there should be a more of a legitimate discussion as to whether or not UCLA gets that 1 seed as opposed to UConn. I think there's a lot of assumption that UConn gets that, but because UCLA did play the overall number 1 toughest schedule, and they only lost 1 game, which was to fellow 1 seed Texas. I'm not ruling out the possibility that UCLA gets that number 1 overall, and it's a tough question to answer because those are 2 of the 3 or 4 best teams in college basketball. Between UConn and UCLA, who would you rather have? But what that decision is going to be is going to dictate ultimately who you would play in the Elite 8, barring anything crazy. And I really don't know, man. UConn still is a buzzsaw. They're the defending national champs for a reason, and they're winning their games by an average of a bajillion points. And UCLA just went through maybe what I think is the 2nd most complete conference in the country and obliterated a lot of teams that were top 20 in net all season long. So it's early, feels like a lose-lose, but I don't know if that's even much better than having to play Texas again, right? Yeah. If that ended up being the case, because it's going to be hard either way, but that's ultimately going to decide maybe one of the biggest negatives of having to play in Sacramento is who you might have to face in the Final Four.
We'll find out South Carolina's ultimate destination coming up this weekend with Selection Sunday. And again, the tournament will start since they're a number 1 seed here in Columbia for the first couple rounds at the end of next week anyway. Men's team wrapped up the regular season on Saturday. They turned their attention to Nashville coming up this week for the SEC men's tournament. We'll get into what happened on Saturday on the other side. Halftime show, Tyler Head, Kale Wilson, Elijah Campbell hanging out, talking some hoops on your Monday on the game.
Get it in, and here comes Meach into the front court. Pulls up, lets a long three go, and buries it. 0.7 of a second left. Meechie Johnson from 30 feet. Ole Miss will inbound to Dia. He lets it go with the buzzer, and it's off the top of the backboard. And you can put Spurs on this one. Meechie Johnson with a three-pointer in the final second of play. Wins it for the Gamecocks against Ole Miss, and Carolina will wrap up the regular season with its fourth SEC win of the season.
Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Cale Wilson, Elijah Campbell hanging out, talking some hoops here in the 1 o'clock hour. That was called Saturday afternoon. You may have been out at Founders Park or watching the SEC women's tournament and not realize that Carolina was playing their last men's basketball game of the regular season, but they were on the road at Ole Miss. And yes, indeed, we haven't had a ton to cheer for, so at least in the moment we can enjoy Meechie Johnson. It's not technically a buzzer beater because there's like half a second left, but we'll call it that as he helps South Carolina walk off with a 64-61 win to win the final game of the regular season, give them 4 wins in conference play, which is twice as many as they had last year. So I guess we're going to talk improvements. There you go. And at least for the day, feel good about something. Meechie Johnson's obviously beloved around here. He's only got at most maybe a game or two left in the Gamecock uniform. So cool moment for him. And again, it doesn't really change anything about this year, but at least it gave you a reason to smile for a little bit.
Oh, yeah, it certainly did. And for those guys, too, man, I think that's my biggest takeaway is that I'm just more happy for those dudes because it's been such a tough year. Like, you know you've been struggling. They're on the floor. They're the ones experiencing, a lot of these losses that they have. It's been a really tough year. You're going to practice every day amidst like a long losing streak before this. And I'm sure it can be really discouraging, throughout an entire year to have the season that they've had. And you kind of just look and grasp, at a certain point you're not playing in the NCAA tournament, that there's not going to be a postseason. And you just at that point kind of grasp and you look for anything that can get you excited about this year, something that you can hang your hat on. And I think an exciting win like that was certainly something that they could look at and say, hey, look, we ended the season on a highlight. For Meechie Johnson, too, who's played a long up and down, college basketball career, for him to be able to have that he could look at forever, show the kids one day, do all this where, hey, look, I hit a buzzer beater to win a game on the road in the SEC. That was fun. And I'm sure a lot of them had a ton of fun in that game, winning it in the manner in which they did. For them, I'm glad they got to have that moment of fun in a really not so fun sort of year. But if you want to hear something crazy, Tyler,
sure.
You look at this for framing.
Okay.
Technically speaking, this team surpassed expectation because they did not finish last in SEC play. That shot kept them from finishing last in SEC play. So technically speaking, because they were picked last.
Yep.
Technically speaking, they improved, or they not improved. They overperformed expectation. Technically, playing heavy semantics here, but technically speaking, that is the case.
Now, do we go about this like Texas A&M did, where they were projected to finish 14th and they finished tied for 4th, and they put out a graphic telling you as such over the weekend? Do we need to? Does Carolina's social team need to have just a picture of Lamont Paris clapping that says "not last" or something on it?
Like one of those on-3 graphics, and it just says "not last."
Yeah.
Right. Oh man, they might get that poor admin might get booed into oblivion. But no, that's pretty funny. That would be something to be able to pull that out. But technically, yes, they could say that.
They could.
That you can actually say.
And we'll get to the future coming up in a minute. But the next task at hand, of course, is the SEC men's tournament coming up on Wednesday, where by virtue of not losing on Saturday, they avoid the early game, which would have been tipped off at 12:30. And I think we might have all kind of appreciated that game being the one that take place in, because it says 9:30 on Wednesday. It's really going to be like 9:45 or 9:50 because you're at the mercy of the game before you finish. And then you got to have 30 or so minutes to clean the floor and get everybody out there for warm-ups. So it's going to be a very late night on Wednesday that could end South Carolina's season. Or, I mean, you did beat Oklahoma earlier on this year. You could make it all the way to Thursday.
Yeah, like that's the one thing that brings this tournament some intrigue. Whereas 2 weeks ago, I don't know if there was any intrigue, in the SEC men's basketball tournament. Now, am I bummed out about the late start? Absolutely. Am I prepared to just totally take the L on sleeping next week or this week? Yeah, 100%. Because you're right. when they say a game's going to start at 9:30 in a conference tournament, let me go ahead and tell you right now, I have been to enough of these that the only game that is starting on time is the first one of the day. Even sometimes if it's the first one of the session, right? Because they'll break it down between first session and second session.
Yep.
Even like the first game of the second session might not start on time if it took a while to end the second game, right? So even game 3 in a 4-day slate at the same arena might not even start at the scheduled time. That's how these things go. And I'm telling you right now, if you are banking on a 9:30 tip-off, I have bad news for you. So it is going to be late. But the positive is you're playing Oklahoma, a team you've beaten once all year, already this year, a team that has not really impressed me at any point. Like they spent a little more money than you on their roster, and they were able to get a couple players in transfer portal that I initially thought would have been big additions, have not really come to fruition this year. They haven't really put it together. This is a team that, quite frankly, if you look at a lot of the numbers or you watch them a lot this season, they're not one for playing defense, Tyler Head.
Nope.
Defense is optional for Oklahoma. 116th in the country in defensive efficiency. Now, they're top 25 offense. They do have a little bit of a high ceiling because when they get hot, they can be dangerous, and that's usually where you see them pull off some of their wins. I mean, they beat a really good Missouri team at home because they shot the lights out. That's something that they have the potential to do, but if you're a Gamecock fan, I think what should give you a little more excitement is that the fact, at least Lamont Paris' specialty is coaching defense. If you can guard the perimeter and you can maybe get a little lucky and have them miss some threes the same way they did here at CLA earlier this year, there's a chance that maybe you do play multiple games. And I think, if you win the last game of the regular season in the manner they did against Ole Miss and you win a game in Nashville, is it going to fix the season? Absolutely not. No, nothing's going to fix the season. I think what damage is done has already been done. But does it do good for the morale of the program? Significantly. And if you're bringing Lamont Paris back next year, you need as much high morale as you can get, and that could be winning a game or maybe even 2, because who knows with Texas A&M? They've been really up and down all season long. Could be a positive, I should say, for your team moving forward.
And different teams are motivated by different things, and there's no blood feud between South Carolina and Oklahoma, but you do look at Oklahoma as a team that's currently on the outside looking in the next 4 out category in the latest bracketology. They have to win a couple of games to work themselves into the NCAA tournament, which would obviously start with South Carolina. So if you need anything else to play for, you could say, hey, we can at least maybe ruin another team's season in the process of trying to win another game. So if you're looking for some kind of storyline of this game, there's that.
Well, especially considering they already lost to you, and your spot in the net ranking is such.
You're already dragging them down enough.
Exactly. Yeah, you've already dinged up their resume enough. If you beat them twice, like they have to, Oklahoma has to win like 2 or 3 games to even be remotely close to being in the discussion. I think of being in the NCAA tournament. If you could beat them again, then that eliminates all doubt. Then you could say, hey, sorry, Porter Moser. Better luck next year,
If he gets a next year at Oklahoma, that is.
If that's true, if he gets a next year, which, I mean, from what I have read, does not seem likely, right? So that's a coach that's, that's on a really hot seat too, and that is also a program that is completely desperate to be able to win this game late on Wednesday night.
Well, speaking of the future, what's the latest about Lamont Paris, and if he's going to be returning for South Carolina or not? What that coming up next is a wrap up the hour. It is the halftime show. It's all right. Cale Wilson, Elijah Campbell hanging out here in the 1 o'clock hour on your Monday on the Game. All right, welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler Head, Kale Wilson, Elijah Campbell wrapping up hour number 2 here on your Monday. Jamie Radford going to join us as always at 2:15. Talk some Gamecock baseballs. We'll get back into what happened this weekend over at Founders Park. And Elijah, I've just been informed by Jen Jensen, tomorrow morning at 7:30, you guys will be revealing the winner of the Crescent Construction Grand Slam giveaway contest. $425 going to one lucky listener after Talmadge LeCroy went yard with the bases loaded last night, helped South Carolina pick up the 13-1 run rule win over Princeton. So we're handing out money early in the season. That's always a good thing.
Yes, always a plus. And you know what? It's at a good time, too, because they waited long enough to be able to get the Grand Slam to where now when we actually give this thing out, it's a sizable pot, too. So whoever's going to be the winner tomorrow, again, listen in at 7:30. If you did fill out, the form online, you did join, you can't win. If you don't enter the contest, we had a lot of entries. So make sure you're listening tomorrow at 7:30 to see if you are the lucky winner.
And I'm not sure if it resets or not, but just to be safe, go back to 1075thegame.com. And if you need to, re-enter again because it resets to $25 for tomorrow night's game against the Citadel, and will grow again and again until somebody else hits Grand Slam, which hopefully we're giving away a lot of those over the course of this season. But we're talking basketball in this hour, and to wrap up the discussion, and again, this is kind of, we're focused on the men's tournament and seeing what Carolina can do, but the greater discussion is the overall future of this program. And I know the majority of fans that text us or tweet us or whatever that call in, a lot of them want Lamont Paris gone. And I can understand that sentiment because this has been a disappointing year, and 3 out of his 4 seasons have not met expectations. But all indications up to this point, and even up until over the weekend, Pete Nakos put out his latest update on what he's been hearing about coaches that are on the hot seat around men's college basketball. It seems like all signs are pointing to Lamont Paris coming back. And I don't know at this point if there's anything that could happen Wednesday against Oklahoma that would change that. So I've said it earlier. I feel like we're almost kind of softening the blow because there's going to be a lot of blowback when this gets announced. If it does go this way, that people are going to be upset, and I understand that. But again, we've kind of been warming up to this for a couple weeks now that it does seem like he's going to come back potentially with more resources because that's something they've lacked these past couple years. And again, I'm not anticipating any changes being made at the top of men's basketball for right now.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I've been in the same boat now for a couple weeks. I've never got any real inclination that, any type of coaching change or regime change there is imminent, at any point, even during the lows of some of this season. And given what we know about the amount of resources spent for this year's team compared to your SEC peers, I think, this athletic administration has kind of reached a point where you have to look at the reality of it is that everybody in this league is spending more money. And if you look at maybe why this is going to be the case is there is a 12 and some change $1 million buyout at the end of this month if you were to have moved on. And if you think about it, I guess maybe from a money perspective, we had the same kind of discussion last year with baseball, is that if you made the change, you'd have to pay the buyout and have to pay top dollar for a coach that is going to be able to get the job done because you don't want to have to do this again in 4 years. That would require making them maybe not the last or lowest paid coach in the SEC, have to replace the full staff, and then allocate more resources too. I do think we've seen a lot of this in college sports too, like Wisconsin and football. A lot of Wisconsin fans were tired of Luke Fickell, but there was a little bit of a buyout there. There was also the element of, hey, we will give you more money. We'll give you what we think you need, and we will be competitive in that NIL space and in that resource space. And if you don't get it done this year, then I think we've seen what we need to, and that's what we're going to get. Now, how much more they're able to allocate, I don't know, but you're going to have to. I would even just say double what you spent this year. I mean, to be competitive in the SEC, you got to be at least average, and the average is a little over $9 million spent. You don't have to be Kentucky, who spent $22 million and some change and bought the most expensive average team in the history of basketball or the history of sports, but you do have to be in a space where it is competitive and you can beat out other teams for really good prospective players, because transfer portal was the largest in terms of submissions last year than any other year. I think that's a record that's going to continue to break itself. You're going to have to be incredibly competitive in that range. And if you're below what the average spending total is, then it's hard to expect many different results.
Well, and again, 2 years ago, which seems like a lifetime ago at this point, but they nailed most of their portal evaluations, and the guys they brought in, BJ Mack, Talon Cooper, and all those guys that were vitally important parts to helping them make the NCAA tournament at that time, operating with a fraction of the budget of the other teams in the SEC. So, and I think this may be the way that Donati views it. Lamont Pierce has proven he can do it. You just need to obviously have more resources to be competitive in today's world of college sports, because it goes up every single year, and maybe Carolina just wasn't able to keep up with the demand these past 2 seasons. So again, I will completely understand the blowback if this gets announced like we expect, but all indications seem to be that Lamont Pierce is coming back for another year, and we'll see how he goes out and spins and evaluates talent in the transfer portal to see if 26-27 can be better than these past 2 years have been.
Yeah, and I think the evaluation thing is maybe bigger than the money thing, right? Like the amount of money you have is going to be the amount of money you have, and you're going to have to do whatever with it as long as it's competitive. It's going to help you out, but you got to really land the evaluation and be able to find the right players for the specific roles that you have in mind, and specifically players that have been proven to be able to achieve those roles right at their previous stops. Maybe not asking a player who had a 17% usage rate for most of their career to have a 25% usage rate and give more offensive burden, right? That's the type of stuff you have to do when you're shopping in the bargain bin. But if you do get a little more competitive in that NIL space and resources that are going to be adequate to winning, you're going to have to be able to find guys that are going to have the ability to be able to play right away, because the beginning of next year, the non-conference slate of next year is going to be mightily important when it comes to actually figuring out the direction of this program. If you're going to be in the right spot, it's going to be crucial.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think a lot of fans, they just want a dude, right? They want somebody that you can look at the transfer portal and say, oh, that's the guy that's going to lead this. Because the past couple of years, you look at the collection of talent, it's like, okay, these are names and they've done X, Y, and Z, but nobody's really stood out. And unfortunately, in today's climate, you have to spin to get those kind of guys, and we'll see if they're able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, you look at all the teams in the SEC, usually the teams that have the most impactful transfers are the ones who were dudes elsewhere, right? Like Jacoby Gillespie at Tennessee was a really good starting point guard on a really good Maryland team that made the Sweet 16. You look at what Florida's trying to do to replace an entire backcourt of really good players. They went out and got an all, Ivy League player, and Xavier Lee is one of the best Ivy League players every single year. You got to get dudes who have been really productive.
Yep. We'll see what happens. Elijah, thanks for hanging out. Go take a nap and get ready for tomorrow.
That's right. Nap time for your boy.
All right, hour number 3 on the way here on the halftime show on the game. Welcome back in hour number 3. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head and Cale Wilson along with you here on your Monday on the game. Again, Bill Gunner out today. He'll be back in here tomorrow, and we'll get his thoughts of things that happened over the weekend. Jamie Bradford going to join us coming up at 2:15 as he always does, and we'll pick his brain about what went on with South Carolina baseball. Also get his thoughts on the basketball teams as well as, man, Cale, it almost was a perfect weekend in terms of, like, the major sports. And typically it's funny that you almost just expect the women's team to handle their business, but out of the 3 major sports in action this weekend, they're the one that actually came up short. Now, they did beat Kentucky, did beat LSU, but losing to Texas on Sunday, if they would have won that game, in addition to men's basketball winning and baseball sweeping, haven't had a lot of those weekends here as of late, so just short of a perfect weekend for the major sports. Obviously, softball as well ends up getting swept by Texas. 2 close games, then 1 game that got a little sideways on Sunday. But, man, we're truly in the busiest time of year for college sports.
Yeah, when it comes to the women's basketball fall in the SEC title game, if I'm a Gamecock fan, I'm really not that worried. I feel like obviously you want to win an SEC title, but I feel like that's not really the main goal when it comes to Gamecock women's basketball. There's some programs that are just like, if we can win the conference title, that'll be a successful year. With the culture and the success of this program, winning an SEC title, obviously you want to win one, but that doesn't have really a huge impact on your season.
Yeah, it's one of those things that if you polled all the Gamecock fans, if you polled the team, polled Don Staley and said, hey, I'm going to give you the option. You can win the SEC women's tournament or you can win the national championship. I don't know a single person that's going to choose that SEC women's tournament title. And if, like the last time they lost the women's tournament back in 2022, if they run the table and are hoisting a national championship trophy here in a month's time, we're going to the loss yesterday would be kind of a funny footnote in the season. Like, remember when they spotted Texas 14 points in that women's championship game and in Greenville and, lost and then just went on a tear in the month after that? Like, that's kind of how we'll refer to that. But it's wait and see. As we talked about with Elijah there in the last hour, it's not going to be easy, and you're looking at matching up with a UConn or UCLA as far as brackets go. You could see Texas again like you did last year in the Final Four. There are teams like Oklahoma out there that have already beaten you once that we'll see what side of the bracket they end up on. So it's not going to be easy by any means, but again, that's what's great about this program, where your expectations are so high that you're already locking them into being in those Final Fours and national championships, but obviously have to go out there and still get the job done.
Yeah, you got to go out in there and get the job done. I feel like, if South Carolina doesn't make the Final Four, it gets to the point with how successful this program has been. When they don't get to the Final Four, it's kind of like shocking.
Yeah, well,
extremely shocking.
Raven Johnson's never not been to the Final Four in her time at South Carolina. Think about that. Her entire career here, she has only ever been a part of the Final Four.
That says a lot. I mean, that just says a lot about the history and the culture, really.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think that's the one sport in the last, I would say, decade that's been very consistent at South Carolina.
Oh, no doubt about it. And there's a reason why people bring up the chicken curse when they talk about the ups and downs of football, baseball, men's basketball. But, yeah, for the past decade plus, women's basketball has been very consistent. Where, again, making the national championship game and losing is a disappointing season because the standard is that high, which is obviously really, really neat. And, again, they'll find out their bracket and destination coming up on Sunday with Selection Sunday, and obviously who they'll be matching up with for the first couple rounds here in Columbia coming up at the end of next week. But an opportunity to rest and heal, and God knows this team needs it. We talked about this with Chris Wellbaum of Gamecock Central Thursday, I believe, when we were previewing the SEC tournament. There were like 63 total starts missed between, or 63 total games missed between various players on this team for injury, for suspension, those kind of things. So you hope everybody's getting back healthy and in good shape again, and you'll be as healthy as you can be for the tournament coming up here in a couple weeks.
This is a genuine question. In the last decade, what has been the most disappointing finish? Was it an Elite Eight? Was that the worst? Or was it the Final Four?
In the past decade?
Yes.
Like from a actual result standpoint, or the feel of how the season went?
Just like when their last loss was in the tournament, because I know they've made the tournament every year in the last decade.
Yeah, since COVID. So again, and many people expected Carolina would have won the national championship in the COVID season. So since then, they've been in the Final Four every single year. They've made the national championship multiple times, obviously winning it. Most recently losing it last year, but they've not made anything less than the Final Four since COVID. They were Sweet 16 eliminated back in 2019, Elite 8 in 2018, of course, won the national championship back in 17. So, again, that's all the basically the timeline since Raven Johnson has been here. So, yeah, it's all been Final Fours since COVID, which, funny enough, I saw earlier today. Today's the day when Rudy Gobert did the thing where he touched on the microphones that sent everybody into a frenzy. And he's not the reason why the NBA season got terminated, but it was kind of the most focal point, considering he was very nonchalant about this. That was 6 years ago, believe it or not. Can you believe that?
It doesn't feel like it was 6 years ago. 6 years ago, dude.
6 years ago.
That was, oh my gosh, 6 years ago. I was at home in lockdown of my junior year of high school. Dear God, I feel old.
Because I was working at the radio station in Athens at that point in time, and I still had to go to work and do shows. Yes, we did 4 months worth of shows without any sports taking place, which was wild. But I had to travel with these papers. I had a document that I kept in the front seat of my car. That way, if I got pulled over and the police officer's like, "Hey, why are you out during lockdown?" I would have a piece of paper that says, "Hey, I'm what is it? An essential worker." Or something. That was the term we were using. Yeah. That I need to be out going to this radio station or whatever. Wild times. Don't miss it.
Yeah. See, there were parts of it that I liked. I think one of the things that I liked is just I didn't have to ever get up early anymore to go to school.
Well, for you in high school, you guys basically folded in for the rest of the year. I guarantee you nothing was getting done in those last 2 months.
Yeah, I think we just kept meeting on. What was the Zoom. Yeah, we kept meeting online, and I feel like the worst grade that you could get at that time because of the circumstances was I don't think anyone was eligible to fail because of everything that happened. But yeah. I think the worst grade that anyone got was an 80.
Wow.
Because of the circumstances, and they said everyone's going to pass with an 80 or higher.
I don't envy you have been a part of that. I graduated the year before, so didn't have to deal with that. But yeah, wild times, and hard to believe it's been over half a decade since that happened, and God help us that never happens again.
Yeah, I hope it doesn't happen again. It was interesting to experience. It was like it. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I'm not. I'm trying to figure out the right way to say this. It's interesting to have been able to live through a time that felt like because I remember when it first happened, people were comparing it to diseases from a long, long time ago. What were they comparing it to?
Well, the Spanish flu was in 1920.
Yeah.
These things crop up every 100 years. So the Spanish flu was what they compared it to, and obviously we didn't have all the things going on in the world at that point in time to compare to shut down and all that. But yeah, definitely weird. It's hard to believe it's been 6 years on that. But there's your little history nugget for the day, I guess. You've been keeping me updated as the show's gone along. A lot of free agent moves going on in the NFL right now, as we're a little over a month and a half away from the draft, and guys going to the market, signing with new teams, and we've got a couple of pretty interesting ones that have already been in the books for today, and ones that have happened over the weekend as well.
Yeah, there's do you want me to go over a couple of them?
Yeah. What's your biggest one? Which one do you think's the biggest to you?
The biggest? Ooh. Dang, that's a good question. There's one or two, I'll say, because I feel like this one deserves to be mentioned just because it's local. The Carolina Panthers signed Jalen Phillips from Philadelphia. That's a big one, I feel like, for people around here.
Okay.
Because I feel like they'll find that very interesting. And then outside of that, the Jets got Minka Fitzpatrick or Kobe Bryant going to the Bears from the Seahawks. Or Kenneth Walker going to the Chiefs.
That's what I was obviously running the football. And look, there's a lot of things that went wrong with the Chiefs last year, but their inability to run the ball consistently was definitely a problem with their offense. And you went out and signed the Super Bowl MVP, which, I mean, if you're going to address an area of need, that's the kind of guy to do it with.
Yeah. Or how about this one? Travis Etienne just got signed to the Saints.
I saw that one. I don't know how many headlines that's going to pop because the Saints are still kind of terrible. So I outside of when they play the Panthers, and maybe kind of one of those oh yeah, I forgot he signed with that team type thing.
Yeah, I will say, and I'm surprised but not surprised about it. because obviously the Jets have been terrible for a very, very long time, but the players that they've been signing have really caught my eye. I mean, I already said they signed Minkah Fitzpatrick, and then they just signed Demario Davis from the Saints as well.
Yeah.
He's also a veteran on the defense.
Well, at some point you have to start winning, right? So you make the moves, and now the belief is they're still going to position themselves to try and be in the Arch Manning sweepstakes for next year to get the quarterback thing figured out. But you have to start acquiring this talent at some point. I don't know how good Aaron Glenn's going to be as a head coach. Obviously, year number 1 was really bad. Didn't have a ton to work with there. But, yeah, I mean, the goal of being bad and tanking and all that kind of stuff is eventually turning it around, and we'll see if these moves end up netting any results.
Tyler, you're a big historian guy, right? Like fun facts and stuff?
I try and be.
Okay. This past season, the Jets defense had a record for the first time in NFL history. And normally when the Jets make records, it's not a good thing.
They had no interceptions, right?
Dang.
Yeah,
I
remember that.
Okay, wow. Well, that just stole my thunder.
Well, hey, you can address that with a guy like Minkah Fitzpatrick, so they're trying at least.
That is true. That is true. And maybe Demario Davis can come up with one on a pass deflection somehow or a check down.
One of the big ones from over the weekend, of course, Max Crosby going from the Raiders to the Baltimore Ravens. Again, the Ravens defense struggled a lot last year, and the Raiders are going to get a first-round pick for this year and a first-round pick for next year. As they're obviously still in rebuild mode as well. We expect them to take Fernando Mendoza with the number 1 overall pick, Clint Kubiak taking over as the head coach. But that leverages them a lot to work with to acquire assets by moving on from Max Crosby, and the Ravens, who struggled on defense last year, get somebody that can get after the quarterback.
Yeah, in times like these, there's always pros and cons. I mean, you get someone good, but you're going to end up getting rid of somebody good. And the Ravens did get Max Crosby, but they lost a reliable target and tight end who South Carolina people I feel like are pretty familiar with, Isaiah Likely, who used to play at Coastal Carolina down the road.
Yeah, again, you got to move things around, and again, all this is still happening right now. We'll see what the final results, end up being, but I think that is a positive move for both sides. Again, addressing an area of need for a team like the Ravens, as well as giving the Raiders what they need in terms of acquiring assets with picks and stuff. It also frees up some of the money as well, because he obviously has the big contract out there in Las Vegas too.
Yeah, for sure.
Another one here, I guess you can kind of call this a delayed trade, because the it is a delayed trade because the Cowboys got Rashawn Gary from the Packers. Of course, the Cowboys did the preseason trade with Micah Parsons going to the Packers, and this trade is only for a 2027 fourth-round pick. But the Cowboys, again, addressing an area of need that they had last year, which was pass rush.
Yeah, it was definitely something that they were lacking. There was another one that I saw, a couple more. The Cardinals just picked up Tyler Algier from Atlanta,
Yep.
and the Lions signed Cade Mays from Carolina, and the Titans just signed Wan'Dale Robinson from New York.
Tyler Algier he's a solid 2. I know Bijan Robinson gets all the shine, but like Algier's a perfectly suitable running back, assuming he stays healthy. Again, the Cardinals kind of have their own mess as they're moving on from Kyler Murray, but I'd be interested to see how he does out there.
Yeah, I mean, I know you're a Falcons fan. Are you not happy about losing Algier? Or
it doesn't bother me. You still got Bijan. I'm trying to think who else is in that running back room right now. So no, it doesn't bother me. And again, this happens. It's running backs have a short shelf life, so you draft them, you move on from them. So that doesn't really bother me. They're making other moves, like maybe bringing in Tua Tagovailoa, that maybe bothers me a little bit more. But it is what it is.
Yeah, it's at the end of the day, I mean, you're gonna get rid of good people, but you're gonna get good people in return. So it's just really just risk reward.
That is the nature of the NFL, and again, we'll stay updated on what's going on with the free agent market as of right now. But on the other side, Jamie Bradford going to join us to talk some Gamecock baseball as well as basketball and recap the whole weekend as the halftime show rolls along. Tyler Head and Cale Wilson on your Monday on the Game. All right, welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler Head, Kale Wilson hanging out. Bill Gunner will be back in here tomorrow, so Jamie Bradford's got to hang out with us for the next handful of minutes. Jamie, appreciate your time as always. How we doing, man?
Good, man. Doing all right. How about y'all?
Doing pretty well. Obviously a busy weekend. Have to ask first, how was the Eric Church concert? Was it everything you were hoping for?
Yeah, he's the one thing in life that always delivers, Tyler. He always delivers. Yeah, it was fantastic. Got to spend some time with Bill too, and so that was great. But the chief is the man.
Very, very much so. What number show was that for you, by the way?
26.
26. Okay. Over a quarter century. So wow, that's got to be up there among his biggest fans, I would think.
Well, it's over 20 years now. We've been on the bandwagon for a lot longer than a lot of people. We didn't just show up 10 years ago. So,
well, glad you had fun. Obviously, a very busy weekend for Gamecock sports. We'll try and touch on all of them here. But, of course, we lead off with baseball. And really, since we last talked to you, been a very productive week. They've won all 5 of their games, one more to go against the Citadel tomorrow before getting into conference play later on this week. But how do you assess the 5 games that you've seen since we last spoke, including the sweep of Princeton over the weekend?
Well, they had a good week, and they had a better week than a lot of teams that are ranked at the top of the sport did. I mean, you look at LSU, you look at Florida. Those programs went through what South Carolina went through the first couple of the weeks of the season. And, offensively this past week, it just goes to show you that once again, getting on base leads to scoring runs. Scoring runs leads to winning games. And they did a much better job this past weekend of shrinking the strike zone, not having a high chase rate, swinging at pitches that end up off the plate. And that allows you to pick up more base hits, but it also allows you to draw more walks and more hit by pitches. And now this year in 8 games where they've got a 40% on base percentage, 400 or higher, they're 7-1, and they're averaging 9.5 runs per game in those ball games. And and then you can add up the numbers in the others, the 5 and 4 in the others. So, this is it's a South Carolina team that can beat you. They're not as bad as some think that they are. They're not as good as they probably could be, but there is a formula to them winning games, and if they stick to that formula, they'll win more games than a lot of people are projecting them to win right now.
One of the biggest stories of the weekend, Logan Sutter truly hitting his stride, 6 of 10, 7 RBIs, and a home run in each game over the weekend. And as we've kind of been talking about, this is the version of Logan Sutter we were expecting to see. Obviously didn't have a great preseason, got off to a bit of a sluggish start, but now he's truly kind of rounding into form, and especially with Reese Moore going out with the injury in that DH spot being more open now, you have an opportunity to have him in the lineup every single day, and if he keeps hitting like this, he may be the catalyst for this offense scoring a lot of runs this year.
Well, he should never come out of the lineup, ever. I mean, it doesn't matter if he goes 1 for 12 and strikes out 7 times. He's one of the better hitters on the team, and he struggled in the fall, and he struggled in preseason camp, but he's a career 350 hitter. I mean, the guy has always hit. Guys like this, you got to live with it. You got to live with it. You got to work them through slumps. You can't just sit them on the bench. Like you got to get them through it. And he's finally been able to. I mean, he's delivered the couple of pinch hits he got in after he got put on the bench, and now that they're putting him, that Coach Maneri's putting him in the lineup every day, he's delivering. And he's going to have a slump. He's a baseball player. One's going to happen. It might happen starting tomorrow. Who knows when? Hopefully not. But you're just going to have to live with that. You leave him in there, you let him work through it, and by the end of the year, he'll be at the top in all the right categories.
Well, and that's been the weird thing about this start of the season is even going back to the last handful of games before this weekend, he was in and out of the lineup, and we saw Maneri pull him after he got picked off in a game the other day. He's had a couple of missteps at second base, but again, when you have a hitter that's as good as he is and has a track record coming in, you're right, you got to keep him in the lineup because you know what he's capable of. It's kind of been an interesting dynamic of how Maneri has handled that, but again, hopefully this isn't going to be a question going forward, and he's out there every single day.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't coach the team, right? So I'm not going to sit here and every single thing that the head coach does be the guy that questions all of it. But that was a question mark. And look, him getting picked off the other day, I mean, yeah, that's not good. But the base running on this team this year has been bad anyways. I mean, they're 6 of 14 in stolen bases. I mean, there's a lot of things that they haven't done well from a base running standpoint. So I actually think that leads to a little bit of a bigger conversation we probably don't have time for right now. But things like that, you just got to coach those guys through it. Coach them through it. Don't kill and crush their confidence. Get them through it, and you'll be better off for it in the end.
Yeah, talking to Jamie Bradford here on the AAA Heat and Air phone lines, and since you brought up the base running, again, it hasn't been great so far this year. You're also still having some errors in the field as well, and some things that don't show up as errors, like low throws to first base and stuff like that, that I feel like are going to be big difference makers when it comes to conference play starting here in a couple days with Florida. And again, you're practicing, trying to improve on those things, but at some point that becomes kind of an identity of what your team is throughout the year, and I hope those aren't the things we're having to talk about every single week, being the difference between winning and losing as you get into these 30 and important conference games.
You know, and on both sides of it, I mean, you know, this team, they didn't go to the portal and sign a bunch of guys who are going to come in and steal a bunch of bags for you. Like, that's not how this team was built, and I understand that. But, you know, you also can't be 6 of 14 in the stolen base department either through 17 games. So they got to figure something out there on that side. And then on the defensive side, I mean, the pitchers doesn't matter, right-handed, left-handed. They're 1-4, 1-5 to home plate. And, you know, Talmadge LeCroy is the heart and soul of this team, but he's having trouble throwing guys out at second. And it's not all his fault. I mean, a lot of his throws haven't been very good. But also, you know, they're stealing most of these bags against South Carolina off of the pitchers. And Florida doesn't run much. But you know who does? The Citadel. And they play them tomorrow night in Charleston. And that's a way for teams like the Citadel to pop up and beat you in a midweek game. So they gotta work on some of that stuff and start to control it a little bit better.
We'll continue more with Jamie Bradford on the other side. By the way, that Citadel game tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, pregame coverage starting at 6:45 right here on 107.5 Game. We'll get into some pitching coming up next as well. Let's talk about some basketball that happened over the weekend with Jamie Bradford here on the Halftime Show. Tyler Head and Cale Wilson on your Monday on the Game. All right, welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler Head, Kale Wilson hanging out with you on your Monday here on the game. Talking with Jamie Bradford on the AAA Heat and Air phone lines, catching up on the weekend that was for Gamecock baseball. And Jamie, we always end up talking about Riley Goodman at some point during these segments as the season has got it started. I think this past weekend was obviously going to be very important for him to see how he responded after having a rough outing the weekend before in a tough environment, nonetheless, out there in Clemson. Goes 4 innings, 4 hits, 2 earned runs, threw a lot of pitches, so didn't get to go super deep into this game as maybe as far as Maneri wanted him to go. But how do you assess the response that Goodman had returning back to the mound?
Yeah, it was good. You know, they'll continue to work with him on just commanding the strike zone, and it really starts with his fastball. If he can get that located on both edges of the plate, both sides of the plate, and be able to throw it for strikes, the rest of that stuff will loosen up for him. And he doesn't need to really be relying on the off speed. He needs to have the off speed, but he doesn't need to be relying on it. And so as long as he continues to increase the strike percentage with that fastball, you know, he's thrown in 3 games this year. I mean, by the time we get to April, you would expect him to be a guy who's doing some real damage for you there in the pitching rotation or wherever they've got him. And then you got Phil Pott, who's very, very close to being back on the mound. I mean, they've got some options, and so they'll also be able to be a little bit more flexible with him and what they want to do and what positions they want to get him in to keep working on it, but also keep growing and building his confidence. And once he gets more confident, he's going to be dangerous.
Well, I think it's interesting through his first handful of starts here at Carolina. He's bounced around from Friday to Sunday to now Saturday, game number 2, because it was a doubleheader. As you head into this weekend, Saturday, Sunday, where do you think they put him?
Well, I mean, if it was me, I'd probably leave him in there on Saturday because I think that's got. I mean, I'm sorry. If it was me, I would put him in there on Sunday because he could go out there and win you the series if you've got a split series on Saturday. But also, the Saturday starter for South Carolina is also either going to have a chance to win you the series or they're going to have the pressure of evening the series. And evening the series is a lot more pressure than salvaging a game or even winning the series on Sunday if you've already got a win under your belt. So I'd rather him get a couple of looks at the lineup and go from there. But, you know, the thing is, too, with this team, they've got a lot of strength in that middle relief. I mean, Brandon Stone and Alex Valentin are crucial guys. I mean, they can give you as many innings as you need them almost. So, you know, wherever he kind of lines up with having one of those guys available just in case he has a short outing is probably ideal. But I mean, if it was me, I'd have him in there on the back end as it stands today, but we'll just have to see what they do.
You mentioned the back end of the bullpen there with Stone and Valentin, and I think because, you know, Valentin's got a little more flash to his game, people naturally kind of gravitate towards him, but Stone's having a phenomenal start to the year, a solid 1 ERA, only has given up 2 earned runs so far. They'll put the ball in play against him. You know, he's a guy that pitches to contact, obviously, but doing a really good job and did that once again, being able to come in and shut things down in game 2 on Saturday.
Yeah. I mean, he's a sinker ball guy, you know, so obviously he's designed to be able to get the opponent to hit the baseball on the ground. But I mean, when you look at everybody that's thrown this year, name one guy on this team. I mean, I know that Marlatt has gotten in there and he's obviously had his struggles, and I know that they've seen some good things out of Cooper Parks. But they don't have anybody else on the staff that's been through the SEC like Brandon Stone has been. I mean, so, you know, he's the one guy who returns. Not that they don't have other guys who haven't pitched in big moments and in other uniforms, but in this uniform here, Brandon Stone's the only guy you've got who has been through those wars. And so, you know, it's very rare, if ever, that he goes out on the mound and he's in a situation that he doesn't have some sort of experience with, and that is just incredibly valuable.
Yeah, Jamie Bradford joining us here in the AAA Heat and Air phone line. Speaking of the SEC, and you alluded to it a moment ago, a lot of interesting results around the conference before we even get into conference play. Florida, who you'll see this weekend, drops the first 2 games against High Point and needs 12 runs to beat them in game number 3. LSU drops a series to Sacramento State. They've lost some interesting midweek games. Georgia's lost to teams like Troy and Western Carolina. And look, not every team goes undefeated in non-conference before getting in to SEC play. But I feel like we've seen more maybe eyebrow-raising results so far in the first month of the year than maybe in some years past that could set us up for a very interesting conference slate coming up here soon.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is just indicative of where, a lot of college athletics is going. I mean, I feel like in football, you don't really know who you are until about the fourth or fifth week of the season anymore. And we might be in a similar spot in baseball too. I mean, it's hard. You go to the transfer portal and you bring in all these players and they're expected to just hop in there and immediately perform. Some do, some don't. And it takes a while for coaching staffs to be able to figure out who they've got, who they don't have, work through injuries. How do kids respond to this? How do they respond to that? What is my best lineup? And you're seeing that. I mean, if you look at, we've talked about South Carolina, but you look at Tennessee. I mean, nobody can sit there and argue with me and tell me that Tennessee isn't much better than that 12-4 record. But Tennessee, Josh Elander being the head coach, they bring in a bunch of transfers this year as well. There's a bunch of change, and you got people doing things in ways that haven't been done before, and you're trying to get things figured out. Same thing with Florida. Miami's 12-4, and I know they're in the ACC, but you don't know. And what you saw last weekend out of the Gators, or what you saw maybe a couple of weekends ago out of South Carolina, doesn't mean it's going to carry over to tomorrow or next weekend. It just doesn't. I mean, there's just so much that can continue to change between now and then. So you just have to, when you go to the ballpark every day, that day stands on its own. And that result might not be indicative of who you are as a team or what you're going to be or what you have been, but you just got to stay in the moment. And then when that game's over, you got to focus on the next one. And it's hard to do that sometimes when you lose to teams you're not supposed to lose to. But if you can stay in the fight, you'll find a way to get out of it.
A couple more minutes here with Jamie Bradford on the AAA Heating and Air phone lines. Of course, basketball in action over the weekend. The biggest headline being the South Carolina women coming up short to Texas. And look, they still have the capability of running the table and winning the national championship. But I think we saw on display yesterday, if you spot any good team 14 points, it's going to be a hard hill to overcome no matter how talented you are. And I think we all hope that that's a learning lesson for them that allows them to lock in even more for this tournament coming up here in a week and a half.
Well, Dawn's teams, when they lose, they're pretty darn dangerous after they get beat. I don't know what in the world she does or says in the locker room and the rest of her staff, but generally after they get beat, it's really, really hard to beat them again for a while. And I would predict that that's probably going to be the same thing here. I mean, I don't think there's anybody in their right mind that doesn't think that this team's not going to be in the Final Four. The last time that they lost the SEC tournament championship, they won the national championship. So, I mean, they're very, very dangerous, very, very dangerous. And you just tip your cap and give Texas all kinds of credit for what they did on Sunday afternoon. I mean, it was a brilliant performance, and they beat South Carolina fair and square. And there's a chance that these teams are going to see each other again. I mean, the thing that I think matters is this might end up shipping South Carolina way out west instead of to Fort Worth. We'll have to see what happens with the seeding, but it looks likely that Carolina, when they advance, is going to have to go to the West Coast to play the next couple rounds of basketball. So, there's not a whole lot that needs to be said. Dawn's teams have just proven it too many times, Tyler. Like,
sure.
You don't sit here and dissect their losses really, because they know what they did to deserve to get beat. They'll dissect that on their own. They'll correct it, and they'll come back strong next week in the tournament.
On the other side of things, men's team in action for the final game of the regular season. Meechie Johnson hits almost near buzzer beater. There was like a half second left before the buzzer went off, but still wrapped up the season with the win, 64-61 at Ole Miss. They've now won 4 games in conference play, which is more than last year, so that's a positive. Worked themselves into a more favorable game coming up on Wednesday against the 11th seed Oklahoma, who, of course, they already beat during the regular season. And look, nobody's sitting here expecting them to go on a 5-game run and make the NCAA tournament, but an ability to end the season with a couple of positives. And as we've already talked about, heavy indication that Lamont Paris is likely returning next year. We're just waiting on confirmation on that.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see. I mean, I've got mixed intel on that for weeks now, so I stopped trying to decipher through all of it and figure out what they're going to do. But, so they beat Oklahoma, but Oklahoma's hot. And remember, Carolina's actually on the better side of the bracket going into the tournament. They don't run into Florida unless it's deep. Kentucky, they don't have to play them. They won, so they're not the 16 seed, and Kentucky gets the 16 in the first round. They don't have to play basically the 2 home teams in Vanderbilt and Tennessee, so they're on the better side. But Oklahoma is on the next 4 outlines. So they're playing to get a couple of wins or more and get into the tournament. So it's going to be a challenge for South Carolina. But, yeah, at least they've got some good momentum. You know, Michi Johnson had a special moment the other day. And the crazy thing about this is if you added 3 wins or 4 wins to South Carolina's win total this year, they are Oklahoma. And Oklahoma is on the bubble to get into the tournament. So is that really how thin this thing is? And all the bubble teams lost this weekend. Like, could South Carolina really be maybe a non-conference win and then 3 league wins shy of being on the bubble with as bad as this year has seemed to be this year for the Gamecocks? I don't know, but I'm just saying if you reverse the records, that's where the Sooners are right now. So it's pretty crazy to think about.
Yep, no, you're absolutely right on that. Before we let you go, as again, we started off talking about baseball, what's Jamie Bradford's prediction for Gainesville this weekend?
Well, I don't think they'll get swept. I don't, you know, it's going to be hard to win the series, but it's always hard to win any series on the road in the SEC. But the old Ray Tanner saying of don't get swept on the road applies here, and I don't think that they will.
Well, hopefully you're right on that, and maybe even a little bit better. We'll see what happens. And again, maybe they can capture some of the magic of what High Point did down there in Gainesville this past weekend. Jamie, appreciate it as always, and we'll talk to you next week.
Okay, buddy. Thank you.
All right, Jamie Bradford there joining us on the AAA Heating and Air phone lines. And as I outlined in the last hour, with Talmadge Leroy's grand slam that he hit last night, we're going to be giving away the $425 for the Crescent Construction Grand Slam contest coming up tomorrow morning at 7:30 on the early games. Make sure you're tuned in with Elijah and Preston to hear who that winner is. And with tomorrow night being the next game for Carolina baseball, another chance for you to win as the number resets to 25 and will go up in each and every game. So go back to 1075thegame.com and register for the Crescent Construction Grand Slam contest. We'll come back. We'll wrap up the show. Up next, it is the halftime show here on the game. All right, welcome back in halftime show. It's Howard Head and Cale Wilson wrapping things up here on your Monday on the Game. Up next, Scott Hamilton going to handle things from 3 until 6 for Terry Ford today and tomorrow, as Terry's out for a couple days, and I believe we'll be back here on Wednesday. So I think Dave's going to be hanging out with him. So Cale, appreciate you hanging out from 12 to 3 today. I think we got a lot done, a lot accomplished, a lot talked about.
Yeah. I feel like we did reach a lot of good points, and I'll be back tomorrow and Friday. You can't get enough of me.
So, okay.
You sound so excited.
No. It's that nobody tells me the plans for the week. So, like, I was like, oh, Cale's producing 12 to 3 today. Dave's doing 3 to 6. Like, I guess I could have figured that out. But, you know, I just go with the flow of whatever happens.
As Dave just entered the studio.
As Scott Hamilton slowly sneaks his way into my camera frame as well. Before we get out of here, I wanted to talk about this. You watched the SEC Women's Final on TV yesterday, right?
I actually did not, but I kept up with it.
Okay, so since you didn't get to see it on TV, this might be news to you. Like anything with college basketball, the game before the SEC Women's Final didn't fit in its time window. It was the ACC Women's Championship that was supposed to go from 1 to 3. Game goes into overtime and obviously exceeds the 2-hour time window. So of course, what happens? The SEC Women's Final gets bumped over to ESPN News. You get the little graphic in the bottom of the screen that, hey, your game's happening on a different network, and you switch over there. So I did, and I'm watching South Carolina and Texas in that first 5 or so minutes until they take that first media timeout about halfway through the first quarter. At that point in time, they're like, hey, if you're watching on ESPN News, switch over to ESPN to watch the conclusion of the game. Well, I didn't do that initially, and instead of ESPN News going to a commercial break themselves, they went right into the next set of programming that was supposed to be in that 3 o'clock window. Do you want to take a wild guess at what was being shown at 3 o'clock on ESPN News?
If it's ESPN News, it's probably nothing that many people watch. So I'm going to go with... Okay, I got 2 guesses.
Okay.
Either Cornhole Championship or poker.
No, good guesses. I think the general public is aware of both of those sports. This was something I didn't know existed. How about the pillow fighting championships?
I
aware
did
of this?
not know that existed. I've heard, actually, you know what? I think I may have scrolled across a guide now that I think about it and seen it, but I did not tune in. But that's something that I thought you would see on like ESPN 8, the Ocho.
Well, that's
when they do that.
That's what I was thinking. I'm like, this is one of those things that when they do the Ocho every August, I definitely would expect to see, not in the middle of March with all these other sports going on. So yeah, I watched it for a second before I flipped over back to the women's game because I was just kind of intrigued. Apparently, this is something that cropped up during COVID. They were looking for a more family-friendly alternative to like UFC or mixed martial arts, because when you look at it, like, these dudes look like cage fighters, right? They're in a boxing ring, and they have these like large sacks that are like, I don't know, 3.5, 4 pounds or something like that they're whacking each other with. And apparently you get points for where you hit the person and knockdowns and stuff like that. But I was not aware that this was a thing, but apparently there's an entire genre of sport that's been existing for the past 5-6 years that has flown completely under my radar.
Okay, I'm sold. We need to have a 107.5 The Game pillow fight. We need to do it. And we can either do it tag team wise or we can do it tournament style. Who do you think would win?
Well, I think like mixed martial arts, there's no like tag team. It's one-on-one. And
you think would win a one-on-one, all of us?
These things are they got some weight to them, so you need to have the strength to be able to swing it. If I'm counting all of us,
my money's either on you or Dave.
I don't know. You and Elijah are kind of lanky, so I feel like having length helps you out here because like shots to the head are a point that you'd be avoiding taking some of that damage. So I don't know. I think you could hold your own in this.
See, maybe I've got the length, but I don't think I've got the reflexes for a pillow fight. I just don't think I got the reflexes for something like that.
Well, I think you can block with the pillow though. So
can
like
you?
And I only watched it for like a minute, but I think you can block shots with the pillow. So maybe you can be more of a defensive fighter. I don't know.
Maybe.
But this was it was eye-opening to say the least. And like So on my like traditional television, like I have Spectrum and I don't have ESPN News through that. I have it through my parents' ESPN app login because they have more channels than I do. So I'm not routinely watching ESPN News. Again, it's kind of the place where, you know, your game starts because another game's run long. That's kind of what the channel's good for. But apparently these are obscure sports they're showing in the middle of the day on Sunday afternoons that I was not aware of.
Hey, man, it's Sunday afternoon and you get home from church or lunch afterwards, and nothing screams Sunday afternoon sports like pillow fighting.
I guess not. So if you want to dive into that, look up Pillow Fighting Championships. There's a whole website with rules and events and things. There was fans there. I don't know if this was like an undercard to a boxing match or whatever because they were in a boxing ring, but people were watching, so they must be doing something right.
You know what? Maybe I might need to take a look at it. How long will I be taking a look at it? Not very long, but I might take a look at it.
You know, you might be able to catch the replay on the ESPN app from yesterday for all I know. If you search it on the app, I'm sure you'll be able to find it. So if you got nothing better to do, there you go. There's your homework for the day.
Yeah, I was about to say, if I have nothing better to do, I have to be pretty bored to do that, but I might do it.
Oh, man. Anything you're looking forward to tonight, sports-wise? Anything on your radar?
Ooh, tonight I'm actually looking forward to the Southern Conference Final between Furman and East Tennessee State because obviously Furman's a South Carolina team. I'm a big patriotism guy, as Elijah Campbell likes to say. So, unfortunately, you know, the Gamecocks, unless they go on a crazy run, will not be making the NCAA tournament. So I'd like to have another team represent the state. So it'd be cool to have the Paladins make it. They have a crazy March Madness moment. Remember a couple years ago they drained a very clutch 3 to beat Virginia. That was a crazy moment, and I think that was one of the most memorable moments this decade, in my opinion. So I'm hoping they can make it again.
I love mid-major tournaments. Looking at tonight, you have that for the SoCon. You also have the Sun Belt with Georgia Southern and Troy. That's going to be good. A lot of other tournaments getting into their semifinal rounds as well. But, yeah, truly the best time of year as you're seeing teams punch their ticket to the NCAA tournament that will get rolling coming up later on next week.
There's actually a game going on right now at halftime.
I think it's the SWAC first round.
Alcorn State leads Alabama State 32-31.5.
So there you go. There's your viewing for the afternoon.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Coming up next is the post-game show with Scott Hamilton from 3 until 6 here in the game.
It's the post-game show. 107.5 The Game. Terry Ford not in the house. Jay Phillips not in the house. You've got Scott Hamilton for the next 3 hours on the best and the worst of the weekend Monday. 803-404-6100. 803-404-6100. And there was some good. There was something really bad that happened. But there was some good. And I'm trying to properly position everything. Do I be a cockeyed optimist? Do I be sunny and say, hey, this is the good that happened? Or do we just go ahead and address that elephant in the room? That thing looming in the corner, that bummer from yesterday. And I'm talking about the Gamecocks women getting rolled in the SEC tournament. Not great. Not great. Texas did what it wanted, when it wanted, however it wanted. 78-61 up in Greenville. The Well, Bon Secours Arena. It's supposed to be a home game, for goodness sakes. And it felt like a home game. It sounded like a home game. It looked like a home game, except for what was actually happening on the court. The Longhorns, man, they were bullies. Just pushing their way around, shoving their way around, roaming wild in the paint. And I got to say it. I got to say it. The Gamecocks look shook. We don't see that very often from Dawn Staley and her crew. We'll dive deeper into it. At the bottom of the hour, we got our friend Lulu Kesson of the Greenville News coming aboard, 3:30. And I'm asking this question. This might sum up everything that happened. How much of what went down in Greenville yesterday was Texas bringing its A game on nitrogen? And how much of it was South Carolina throwing up on itself? Pretty simple question. Was it 50-50? Are the proportions slanted one way or another? Then the bigger question, what are the concerns going forward? Was it a one-off? Are there lessons to be extracted from this? Things that can be extrapolated to use in the NCAA tournament? And that's happening. Probably number one seed, both these teams. We'll ask Lulu Kesson of the Greenville News all this and more at the bottom of the hour. Now back to the good of the weekend. And there was good. South Carolina men not ending up in the basement of the Southeastern Conference. A heck of an achievement by any stretch. But, whoo! Had to have it at the very end to get it done to avoid finishing in last place. They beat Ole Miss 64-61, thanks to redshirt senior Michi Johnson. He had 17 points on the day, but his final 3 points were the biggest. And this is what it sounds like. Dave, can you play that cut for me, please, sir? Cut number 5.
They like it to come to Michi, and here he gets it. Michi in the front court with 3. Long-range 3 on the way. Got it! Michi Johnson from deep on the right wing. And Carolina's up 3. Final heave by Dia. No, sir.
That's what it sounded like. The Gamecocks ending the regular season with a victory to finish 13-18, 4-14 in the Southeastern Conference. One game out of last place, but it's not last place. It's one game out. It counts. You definitely have to think Lamont Paris is telling his players that. He's telling his assistants that. And he's telling his boss, Jeremiah Donati, that. Hey, man, we didn't finish in last. What is it Ricky Bobby said, though? If you ain't first, you're last. Well, we know the Gamecocks are not in first place. They do have the SEC tournament coming up. I mean, miracles can happen, especially the ones we've talked about lately with regards to the Olympics, thinking back to that miracle win in 1980, the U.S. hockey team beating Russia. Thinking back just into recent history, again, the U.S. hockey team beating Canada, getting a gold medal. We've seen stuff happen. Michael Campbell won a U.S. Open at Pinehurst. For goodness sake, Skip. Throw up a hand if you know who Michael Campbell is. So it's not out of the realm of extreme possibility that the South Carolina Gamecocks could win the SEC tournament. They got in. If you're in, you got a chance. But we really know that's pretty darn unlikely. Gamecocks play Oklahoma at 9:30 on Wednesday, which in and of itself is a death knell. If you're playing on Wednesday, the odds of you pulling off the impossible are, they're exacerbated 100 billion times having that extra day. It's one of the reasons the folks in Lexington, Kentucky, all throughout the Bluegrass really, are twisting right now because their Kentucky Wildcats are playing on Wednesday. It's kind of the first time in the modern era, and I'll call the modern era anything since the expansion of the 1990s that brought South Carolina and Arkansas into the SEC. It's really the only time South Carolina's ever played on a Wednesday, or Kentucky, rather. They're going to play LSU in the very first game, and a lot of folks up there are twisting, just uncomfortable.